1 second, it's taking its sweet time to load the live. All right, here we go. Welcome everybody. Welcome to Black is White Coats YouTube channel. This is another installment of the Match series. Today we have some amazing surgeons to be. They are gonna join us today, answer a lot of questions we have. Just to introduce them, we have Carrie Hester. She's going to be going to Danbury Hospital for general surgery in Connecticut. And we have Amara Okoye. She's going to be going to SUNY Upstate next year for general surgery as well. And she mentioned she's joining us from Canada. So that's pretty interesting. And Carrie has been doing a preliminary year as well in surgery. She has a shift tonight. So we want to thank her as well, especially for joining us. So just to start off, I want to ask you guys, tell me a bit about your journey, and either of y'all could start.
Okay, I can start.
About your journey to medicine, to surgery, just a brief overview.
Yeah, I was born in Nigeria. I grew up in Nigeria till I was about 16 years old. I knew I wanted to be a physician when I was young. I didn't know what kind of physician. I just knew I wanted to be a physician. I moved to Canada when I was 16. Finished high school in Canada. Went to undergrad in Canada, and then I applied to medical school here in Canada and the Caribbean. Also, ended up going to the Caribbean. And I got interested in surgery my first semester anatomy lab. I knew I wanted to do anything that had to do with the human body, opening it up, and yeah, that's how I got into surgery. And of course, during rotations, that just solidified my interest in surgery.
Awesome.
I'm originally from New York State. I knew also from kind of like Amara from a young age that I wanted to go into medicine, which was weird because I had no parents that were physicians or anything like that, and no one in my family. So, but I really love science and I wanted to help people. So that's kind of how it all started. I did undergrad at GW in DC. Got a master's degree before going to medical school because I many out there, I didn't really struggle in undergrad, but I definitely, me and the MCAT still hate each other to this day. And so I applied to American medical schools, multiple cycles, never got in. I had a lot of friends go to the Caribbean route, and then they were like, Carrie, what are you waiting for? I had no good excuse. I ended up going to Ross, ended up being a real blessing, was able to do well there. And then I actually thought that I did a good amount of clinical research and work in between undergrad and medical school. I thought I was going to end up in primary care because that's the patient population that I worked a lot with and I really enjoyed it. I got into my cores. My first core of third year was surgery, and I absolutely fell in love with operating and being in the OR, and I was like, you're kidding yourself. You're not going into primary care. I actually thought I was going to go into OB. I actually applied OB my first year. I interviewed well, but didn't match. Ended up soaping into a general surge prelim spot, which really ended up being kind of God's plan and design to make me realize that all I really wanted to do from the beginning was be a surgeon. So I reapplied this year and then matched into categorical for surgery. So, and I'm staying at the hospital that I did my prelim at. So, yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, again, congrats to you both. And just to clarify, so going to a Caribbean school, is that considered an international medical graduate?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a very specific topic and one that a lot of folks are going to be kind of itching to hear about, because I know a lot of folks are considering Caribbean schools. So I'd like for y'all to speak about any specific challenges or anything that comes to the forefront of your mind about Caribbean schools, if somebody's considering, going that route. Any benefits, any negatives, and things like that.
I mean, I think the negative is that there's still a stigma out there. So I think I never realized until I applied to residency that your options are kind of limited, because there are places that would just not look at your application. It doesn't matter how great of a candidate you are. But then it's also very doable. If you're someone who is self-motivated, I think you have to be self-motivated, because the school isn't going to do much to push you. You have to learn to push yourself. So if you're someone who's self-motivated, I don't see, I've had a good time at Ross. I did well. So I would do it again if I could. If I was to go back, I would still do it again. But you have to be self-motivated and know what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And for me, like, it was a long time coming before I finally decided to apply to Caribbean schools. And so I think I always tell people now when they ask me, would I do it again? I'm like, yeah, in a heartbeat. I mean, it all worked out for me. But just like Amara said, like, you really have to, you can't depend on anyone else. Like, the school is not going to kind of hold your hand and, you know, get you through it. Like, you really have to push yourself, surround yourself with good people and good friends who will motivate you to stay motivated when you're tired and you're exhausted. And I think that will help you, you know, make sure that you make it through to the other side, because I can say, at least for me, and I'm sure Amara's the same way, at least like 90 to 95% of my friends, like, all matched in their desired specialty, like at their top choices of programs. And so it definitely can be done, but you definitely have to really work hard. And once you get back here and get back to the States, it really is like, it is and it is not a level playing ground, but you know, you rotate with Americans, you know, with students who are all, you know, from American schools, and there's most attendings, like, they don't really look at you any differently, right? So you let your work speak for itself, you let your work ethic speak for itself, and then you'll be, you know, you'll get through and you'll be fine.
Awesome. So many of those things you mentioned, they're kind of universal, right? Med students all over the country, all over the nation, really, all over the world, have to kind of have those attributes. Helping, you know, working hard, being self-motivated, is just, you know, one thing that especially holds true in these Caribbean schools. Okay, cool. Can you all speak about just some practical things, like, let's say, flights back and forth, financial aid? How are those things kind of handled?
So I just will, like, so as a U.S. citizen, you're still eligible as long as you go to certain schools for like the same student aid that you get in the States. So that is essentially, which is nice because it's essentially the same. And then, you know, our school also like had different scholarships available to you if you like met certain criterias. And so a lot of the same kind of things like that are still afforded to you. Obviously, when I was on the island, we were still in Dominica before it got hit by the hurricane. And so traveling there was really, really complicated, just to say the least. And so you always had to like hop like multiple flights to get there, even traveling from like New York. And so that was definitely challenging. It's a little bit, it's much, not a little bit, it's much easier for them now because it's in Barbados and there are direct flights. So, but, you know, of course, I mean, you're going to medical school, you're going to come out with, you know, $250,000+, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. Yeah. So, I mean, no matter how you look at it, mine might be 350, yours might be 250, but like, I feel like once you're getting into those numbers, it's like, what does it even matter? So, so, I mean, but yeah, you're still eligible for like student and all that stuff.
Okay, cool. Anything to add, Amara?
No, I'm Canadian, so it's the same thing. You get a line of credit from the banks here because our federal loans are different. They don't give you that much money, so it wouldn't pay medical situation for sure. So yeah.
What's y'all's interest rate?
The line of credit is actually very low interest. It's like 2.75. So
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow. What's ours, like 6%, 7%?
Yeah, but it's really hard to get a line of credit too, because you have to have a house and you know you have to give them collateral to give you that much money. So I actually ended up getting a loan from Ross. I had a scholarship and a loan, and they gave me the same. They gave me the loan at whatever interest rate the federal loan is for the U.S. students. So yeah.
All right, cool. I know we touched on this a little bit, but I want, you know, for the viewers, a lot of us will go through a lot of hardships, you know, getting into med school, MCAT, like you said, Kari, and even getting, you know, applying for residency and beyond. So I want both of y'all to tell me about a hardship you faced, like probably the biggest hardship if you would like, and tell us how you overcame that.
If I'm gonna be completely honest, I would say my
Mhm.
hardships came before medical school. So
Mm,
medical school was a not an easy ride, but it was a smooth ride. I never had to repeat a
okay,
semester or fail any class or anything like that. But it was
sure.
mostly for me, it was mostly in undergrad. I had to work. I had 3 jobs while I was going to school. So school took the
That's,
back burner. I didn't really study. It wasn't until I got to medical school that I started studying that I realized like, wow, all I could have done then was just I could have just studied. I didn't study at all in undergrad. I don't know what I was doing.
I
It's like
feel
I have
that.
no, I don't know. I didn't even study for the MCAT either. I just booked the exam. I went to write it. So like, I don't know what I was thinking, but those are my hardships was in undergrad. And I knew then that if I got a chance to go to medical school, I wanted to do things differently. So when I got to medical school, I told myself that failing in undergrad was the last time I ever wanted to fail anything again because it sucks. The feeling of failure stays with you for such a long time. Meanwhile, when you succeed, it's like a 2 sec. You're so happy for like a day, and then it's like, okay, back to the next thing. But so I told myself I didn't want to ever fail anything ever again. It sucked. So in medical school, I would say I didn't really have a life in terms of I put all my everything into school, especially the first 2 years, because I saw it as if I do well, learning in class, it would be a smooth ride from then on, and it was. Step exams were easier to study for. Step
Sure.
two wasn't a problem because I already put in all the work I needed in those basic
Mhm.
science years. So I would
Sure.
say for me was in undergrad, and I just had to look at myself and see what I was doing wrong. And I knew that, okay, these mistakes that I made, which were literally not putting in work into school, which mattered then as opposed to working, I knew I was going to make the same mistakes in medical school. And thankfully I did not. So
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely can echo Amara a lot when it comes to that. Like for me, it was like getting into medical school was the biggest obstacle. I didn't really skate through undergrad. Like I actually had some issues there too. Like I failed organic chemistry, which like sucked. And but similar thing, I was like, I knew that if I could get into medical school, like I would do it. Like I would do the work and I would be all right. It was just getting there. And so, I mean, like I said, like I applied like 4 different times and like did not get in still to American medical schools. But I mean, when you're purposed, I believe in God. So like when you're purposed to do something, you know that like it's gonna work out no matter how bleak it looks and how many people will tell you that it can't be done. I feel very fortunate to have such a strong family and church family and friend support that everyone was like, no, you're gonna do this, you're meant to do this. And so even when I wanted to quit, they wouldn't let me. And so, but yeah, for me, I was like, when I get into medical school, like I know I can do it. So it was just getting there. And then when I got there, I was like, I worked hard and I was able to do it. But like Amara said, like I worked really hard, but like it wasn't a struggle for me to kind of get through and do well.
Yeah.
Not matching really sucked. I interviewed well. Like I went on 10 plus interviews for OB. I think now, looking back, obviously, I think it was just kind of all part of the plan to get me to where I needed to be. But that obviously, and I was actually doing my last elective in Uganda when it happened. So having to soak from uh, Africa and Uganda with very spotty internet was not ideal. But everything worked out. So I can't even really complain about that. But yeah.
Got it. I mean, failure is a common thread amongst many, many people who are now successful, especially underrepresented minorities. And we kind of use that as a fuel, right? In hindsight, it's like, if you were to change anything, I don't know if I would, because I think I learned so much from all the failures I've had, for sure. So thank you for that. So kind of branching from that to the next question, kind of appropriately. So mentorship and support groups, those are, priceless things. Those are very instrumental in overcoming failures and in future successes. So can y'all talk about your mentors? How did you seek them out, and kind of the benefits of your mentors?
for me, like I have no doctors in my family or anything like that. And I didn't really seek out a mentor, to be honest, until I got into my rotations and I decided, oh, I want to do general surgery.
Sure.
And I realized that I do need a mentor. And I tried to sort out, at first, I tried to find Black women who were in surgery. And that was very hard. was very hard to find. I actually went to the ACS conference last year and I could not, it was just hard to find. So I just decided I would get whatever. I wanted a female surgeon to be a mentor. I didn't want to, just because, you know, we have different struggles. It's just different struggles and what they understand. So I actually went online. It was like on the Young Black American Doctor page, and I just put it out there that I was looking for a mentor. And I had 3 people send me a message. I contacted one of them, and yeah, I've been talking to her since then. She's a trauma and wound care surgeon, and I'm interested in trauma. So
awesome.
Yeah, one of the biggest things, like I was really involved and still am involved to a certain degree in SNMA. So that was like a huge factor for me, you know, in finding mentorship. And I didn't really seek out a surgery mentor until like recently. And I feel very fortunate to have a great one here. But the biggest thing for me was just at least finding someone that I could just, you know, who was ahead of me in terms of like whether they were an attending somewhere. And so I was able to find that just like through leadership involvement in SNMA. And so, you know, they're like, you know, and they were actually one of the first calls I made when I didn't match, and they were on the phone with me from Uganda, like on the phone with me, like figuring out like what my next move was, like who I could be in contact with, like they were making phone calls, like, you know, sending out feelers. And so your mentor, I think one of the biggest things I learned is that your mentor doesn't necessarily have to be in the same field as you, as long as there's someone who has really strong either relationships, has really strong networking, and just can advocate for you on behalf of you, and who you feel comfortable, you know, just being completely transparent with. And I think that's kind of the biggest takeaway. Obviously, it's good to develop mentors in your desired field. And I think a lot of times you also have to make sure that they don't necessarily have to look like you. Some of my, like one of my mentors here is literally the complete opposite of me. But I want to go into I'm really interested in colorectal surgery. And as soon as I decided that surgery was like what I was still really passionate about, I just, he just pretty much just took me under his wing. So I think that's also an important thing to, so I guess my 2 takeaways are, 1, your mentor doesn't have to look like you. And then 2, your mentor doesn't necessarily be in the same field as you, as long as they're willing to, advocate for you and be there for you.
Great advice from both of y'all. So next question I have is, how did you all get exposure to the field of surgery? I know, Mara, you said you didn't know till 3rd year. So beyond then, and whenever you kind of started, Carrie, when did you both get exposure to surgery, and how did you continue getting exposure, the exposure you needed to kind of foster your love for the field?
My exposure was in 3rd year of medical. My surgery was my second to the last core rotation that I had. Of course, from OBGYN, I really liked the gyne surgery more than I liked OB. So I already knew I liked the OR. But onto my surgery rotation, I really just, where I did my rotation, we had 24-hour Q3 calls. And wow. I never complained. I was never tired. And my parents were with me that month, and they just saw me. My dad never understood why are you not tired? I'm like, oh, I really like what I do. Like we were really involved in the hospital more than my other rotations. So, and then of course in 4th year, I ended up taking a lot of surgical electives to get more exposure to the different, because I didn't want to be biased by just one hospital and one exposure. I wanted to make sure that I actually do like surgery and not just the residents and the attendings in surgery at this hospital. So I just ended up having more surgical electives in 4th year.
Got it. That's important.
For sure. Yeah, I was like, one of my attendings told me that I was like a clerkship convert, which I didn't know what that, like, I didn't even know that was a thing, but essentially like you get into your cores and you like decide that you want to be a surgeon. So I was one of those people because I like did not see myself as necessary. I knew I would like surgery, but I didn't know that I was gonna like just want to do it for the rest of my life. So I just like fell in love with being in the OR. I felt very fortunate because I was like extremely hands-on in my core. And a lot of times I was like the only student on our team. So I got to do, like, they let me do a lot. And I think that for me was a huge a huge factor and played a very large role to kind of why I fell in love with the field. And I realized it wasn't until my core that I realized that I needed a little bit of instant gratification in my career. I like to being able to fix a problem like instantaneously. And so it's something that I didn't realize that I needed, but that surgery offered me. And so, yeah, I just kind of fell in love with it. And then being in a prelim year kind of just further confirmed that that's, what I wanted to do. And even the things that the parts of surgery that I wasn't as excited for, like I didn't think I really liked vascular surgery after my core, but doing it is like a completely different experience. Like now I actually really, really enjoy it, which I did not expect at all. So, so that like just further solidified that I made the right choice.
Great. And for everyone watching, Q3 just means every third night. That means, literally you're on call, you said 24 hours. So every third night you're in the hospital for 24 hours, you go home, rest, 1, 2, 3, the third night you go back 24 hours. So that's a lot. That's true love. The fact that you really enjoyed Q3 call. So yeah, appreciate that. So kind of moving forward, how did you all handle away rotations? And where were y'all for your third year core clerkships? And then how did you handle away rotations? And do you have any tips for anybody going to surgery on how to handle those?
I did my course at Jamaica Hospital in Queens, New York. And then in fourth year, I did 2 surgery rotations at Mount Sinai in Chicago. Okay. And then another one at St. Agnes in Baltimore. Mount Sinai was very busy. It's trauma. It's a lot of trauma.
Yeah, I went to Chicago. Yeah, I live here, so.
Yeah, it's a lot of trauma. I never seen that much trauma in my life. It was everyday gunshot. And I would say, like any AWA rotation, just go there the same way you went. Be prepared. It's a new hospital. You have to learn. For me, I was very just open with the third year students. You're not better than them just because you're in fourth year or anything. They're there. They've done other rotations, most likely at the hospital. So they were very instrumental in telling me where things were and helping me. They know you want to go into surgery. Some of them do not. So they would offer you when there's something going on and you're not there, they would text you to come there. I would say prep, get ready. If you're going to scrub into a case, make sure you read on the patient. No one wants to scrub into a case and the attendant is talking to you and you don't even know the indication for this surgery. Doesn't look good, right? So I know it's just a month, but you can do, in my sub, I was at St. Agnes and I got 2 of my letters from there in just the 1 month. So you can do a lot in 1 month. You just have to show that this is what you really want. Stay there late. It's just 1 month. Just stay late. If there's something running late, just stay. It's just a month of you, auditioning yourself. And, after that, you can have your other chill rotations, but this is not the time to rest or study for an exam or anything like that. I would say if you're going to schedule away rotations, if you can, make sure there's no exams up that you have to study for, so you can actually give it your all. Just be open-minded with the students, the residents, try to get along with everybody.
Yeah, no, I really don't have much to add. Like, I completely agree. I actually did a surgery sub-by as well, and I did it at St. Agnes. And I did my course at Cleveland Clinic in Florida. And so, which was like really fantastic. But I mean, yeah, you got to show up. You got to like just work hard. You don't want to step on toes. So just like always be respectful, always be friendly. And you just like work hard and be yourself. I think, that's like one of the biggest things that people forget to do, is they're like trying to, of course you want to like put your best foot forward, but people still want to get to know you to see if you're going to fit in at their program. And so, you always want to still be yourself, and being genuine always comes through. Just having seen like sub-Is kind of come through my program this past year, like the people who are genuine, the people who work hard, like we're able to, you can tell. So just work hard, be yourself, and you'll be fine.
Great. It's kind of funny throughout this whole match series we've been doing, though that's kind of the motif, that those pieces of advice for third year, kind of be yourself, work hard, is rung through for all specialties. So I just want to point that out and say how important that is. And really quickly, I just want to kind of go over the outline of the timeline for an IMG in terms of, how long do you spend doing the basic sciences? When do you move on to your core clerkships? Because I heard you say Amara 4th year is when you did rotation. So I want to kind of clarify that and see what that is.
No, 4th year I did my elective. So I think it's pretty much the same as most American schools. We spend 16 to 20 months on the Caribbean island for the basic science year. 16 if you're in an accelerated program, and 20 months if you're curriculum, which is a little bit slower. So it's 16 months, and then you usually just go home and study for step 1. And after step 1, I think things have changed now, but after step 1, we usually that's when you start off your clinical rotations. They usually started us off in Miami with an internal medicine foundation, just like a 6-week rotation to get you introduced into the hospital and rotations. And then you go through the 3rd year, the same 6 core electives that most schools have, with the 12 weeks of surgery, 12 weeks of IM, and 6 weeks of peds, OBGYN, and everything else. After that, you study for your CK, or you write it at the end of your course. Then you start your 4th year electives, and that's up to you, whatever you want to do your electives in. And usually have the opportunity to apply to some US schools would let, international students come rotate there. So that's when you get the opportunity to go rotate in those places if you want to.
Oh, okay. And that's 4th year, just to be specific?
Yeah, 4th year.
Okay. Got it. All right, so moving forward, so, can you speak about those standardized tests that you just talked about, CK and everything? How did you prep, and, how did it work out for you in terms of surgery? Obviously it worked out well, but how did you prep, and do you have any tips for others who are prepping for surgery?
So for I guess for step 1 and for step 2, one of the biggest pieces of advice I would say, 1, don't bog yourself down with too many resources. Stick to UWorld for step 1, stick to first aid. I loved Pathoma, I use Pathoma too. But I wouldn't have more than 3, maybe 4 resources. People like Sketchy too. So whatever you use, but don't get bogged down. You don't want to have 10 different resources, because it's too much. It's not worth it, and then you're going to be spinning your wheels. And then the other piece of advice I would give is just focus on what you're doing. I think a lot of people can get sidetracked because they're all your friend will be like, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, but that's not the way you study, right? So as long by the end of your first year, and honestly definitely by the end of your second year, you should know how you study and what's effective for you. So don't try to change that when you're studying for your steps. You still want to stay true to who you are, focus on what you're doing. Everyone's going to be doing their own thing, but you just want to just stay focused. Step 2, definitely, I know a lot of people don't necessarily study for their shelves, but if you study for your shelves, you'll be ready for step 2 CK when it comes. And so my biggest piece of advice is just study for your shelves. And then when step 2 CK comes, you're okay, I'm just gonna run through UWorld another time, and then and then you'll be ready. So just study throughout your 3rd year, and you'll be prepared. So.
Mara, anything to add?
Yeah, I agree with Carrie. I think standardized exams are, a lot of people, I hear people say, oh, I'm not good at exams. Standardized exams are standardized for a reason. They're standardized across the board. MCAT, LSAT, there are so many standardized exams in the United States. It comes down to practice. You have to practice. It doesn't matter what material you know or you don't know. If you're not able to answer a question, you're not gonna do well. So it comes down to practice. The more questions you do, the better. There are some studies out there on people who do 10,000 questions versus 4,000 questions. The more questions you do, because the idea behind it is that the more questions you do, you get exposed to different styles of questions, and you get to see patterns in how they ask questions and answer options. So because there are people who might not necessarily know the material, but they can do well on standardized exam because they know the trick to it is practice. You have to do a lot of questions. You have to spend your time going through those questions, those explanations, not just going through the motions, but reading the explanations, understanding why the wrong answers are wrong and why the right ones are right. And for me, I didn't even have a phone when I studied for step 1. I was literally just at home for 6 weeks, and I just went through it talking to nobody. I didn't talk to any friends. I didn't know what they were doing. I just went through my U-World every day and pathoma and first aid, like Carrie said, and it definitely paid off. I don't think I would have done anything differently. So my advice is practice, practice, practice.
Sure. Great. So in that same vein, so you said 6 weeks, that was probably your dedicated step period, correct? Did you start studying before that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the studying started in basic science years. Every exam that you studied for wasn't just for your class exam, it was for STEP. That's how I studied. I always knew it was for STEP. Because STEP is not the time to study. You're not going to study in 6 weeks. The 6 weeks is time to learn how to answer questions, not study new material. You're not going to learn first aid in 6 weeks. That's just the time to learn how to answer questions, just because, you know, I think exams based by your professor writing your questions is different than, I don't know who's writing this question. So the 6 weeks was the time that I used those three, just pathoma, first aid, and U-World. Before that, I think every exam that you studied for, you were studying for STEP anyway, so.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree.
Great. So can y'all speak, kind of moving forward in the process, y'all speak about where you decided to do your away rotations at, and then moving forward, you know, the application process, how'd you prepare for interviews, things like that?
For me, I did my away rotation. I just went on my schools. I'm very low maintenance, I guess. I just went on my schools, whatever, and I looked at where they had rotations, and I decided to go to those places. That's why I ended up in Chicago and Baltimore. And application season, I definitely put in, I'm Canadian, so I feel like I had the IMG and needing a visa, all like roadblocks in front of me. So I started early on in like May, June. I emailed a lot of programs that, I went on Frida, and I found programs that sponsored a visa, and I emailed them to make sure they sponsored visa, and I asked them if they do take international medical graduates into their categorical position. And interestingly enough, a lot of them replied me. Some told me that, you know, as an IMG, you probably start with a prelim year. I knew I didn't really want to do a prelim because I didn't think anything was going to change in my application. So I wanted to maximize my chances. So I went through every program. I went to their website, read about their requirements, and from that, I really narrowed down. I always had an Excel sheet where I narrowed down where I was going to apply to, because I didn't want to over apply to places where I really had no chance. Sure. Just based on their reply to my email. If they told me they don't take IMGs into the categorical, there's no point spending money. They're not going to see that application. So I definitely did a lot of work going through my school's match list and seeing where previous graduates had matched and making sure I applied to those places. And yeah.
Yeah, no, I did a lot of pretty much the same thing, especially as like a reapplicant. It was good because I was a reapplicant to a different field. So I think that still like almost put me at the level baseline of a applicant when it came to surgery. And so, but I did the same stuff. Like even when I applied to OB, like you just have to do your research, right? Like you realize like, one, this is a very expensive process. So like, you just don't want to just be applying to hundreds of programs knowing that only 50 of them are actually going to even look at your application, because like, honestly, like I want my $26 back. Like, so I did like pretty much the same thing. I would go, I widened my search. And so I used both, like, because I was an IMG who went to Ross. So I used Ross's match page, I used St. George's match page, and I used AUC's match pages to see where they've matched into surgery. I made sure I applied to like all of those programs. And then I would also like go onto actual websites to see if there was like in the last 5, if they had anyone like in their program currently who was an IMG, because a lot of places will say, oh yeah, we've accepted an IMG before, but it was like 10 years ago. So it's time consuming, but it's worth it to just, you know, and you want to, you know, you don't want to waste money in this process if you can avoid it. And so you're only going to do yourself a disservice. And also, it also gets you to know the program because you're combing through their website, trying to find out all this information. So you're kind of like killing 2 birds with 1 stone. And so I would just say be smart about it. Like you don't want it to be September 1st and like you're just adding all your programs. Like that's silly. Like you have from like June to like start to get it together. So, or May even. So, so just do your homework early on, and then it makes it a much easier and smoother process you know, when it's almost time to submit your application.
Great. And for context, everyone watching, applications are due September 15th. So what she was saying, you know, don't wait till like, you know, a few weeks before it's due. Okay, so how do y'all prepare for interviews?
I personally Googled common interview questions and I just decided to go. I talked to a lot of people also, of course, contact upperclassmen that are already residents and ask them like, you know, what kind of questions were you asked? I prepped all these questions, but honestly, at the end of the day, I think most of my interviews, the most common questions was tell me about yourself. So definitely you have to have your little 1 minute spiel on that. And most of it was about your application. So it's really hard for someone to you have to know your application. You know, you can't lie in your application. You have to know what you put in there, work experience, what you did in school research, because that's pretty much what a lot of them discussed. Was I didn't have a lot of interviews that were structured like, oh, I had a few weaknesses and strong points kind of questions, but most of them were really tell me about your, you know, yourself. And then they went into just talking about your application, like very open-ended questions. So I know I Googled those interview questions. I had my sister sit down and I tried to answer a bunch of them to her to make sure, because I tend to talk very fast. So I try to make sure that my voice, everything was, you know, at a tone that they could understand and at a speed that they could understand. So I definitely practiced and timed myself.
Yeah, I definitely recommend. I know a lot of schools, our school offered it. If your school offers mock interviews, it's a good like tool to have just so like you get some of those initial nerves out the way. I think that's like very helpful. And also it's almost good to have someone who is not, because I know for us, some of your mock interviews are with people who like have no relation to the medical field. So they're able to pick up on things that we say naturally that like some people would have no idea like what it meant, or like they can't understand it. So I think that's very helpful. Like, yeah, like Amara said, like have, you know, go through some of your questions with a family member, someone who's outside of the field of medicine. So, you know, because that's just a more kind of natural just conversation. And that's what a lot of these end up being, is it's like a very natural conversation. Because just as much as like they want to just get to know who you are, they know who you are on paper already. That's what, you know, like that's just what they always tell you, right? We already, like, if you're at the interview, like they already like you, like on paper. They just want to get to know who you are as a person, and if you're going to fit in well, you know, at their program with the rest of their residents. And so you really just kind of want to make sure you just feel natural and like you're just going to be yourself. And one of the biggest things I think is that always have like that question, like tell me about yourself, but you also don't want to rehearse anything that's in your application. Like they want to get to know who you are as a person of the things that are not already stated in your application. And I think a lot of people can, you know, overlook that point. Like they know where you're from, they know what school you went to, they know what your grades are, they know how hard you've worked, they know what's in your personal statement. So when it comes to tell me about yourself, like tell them who you are, like what you enjoy, like, you know, why you're so passionate about this, you know, but like don't, you know, do anything verbatim that's in your application, because hopefully they've already read it. Tell them something about you that stands out. You know, tell them something about you. Like for me, I didn't actually talk about how many times I applied to medical school, like in my application itself. So when it came to telling them about myself, I was able to be like, this is how hard I've worked for this. This is how much I've wanted. This is how hard I'm going to work for you. And, you know, why this is going to make me, why I'm going to be a good doctor. You know what I mean? So like, make sure that you touch on those things, those kind of intangible things that don't necessarily come across directly in your application.
Great, great. So here's a question from the live chat. So somebody was wondering about research and surgery. Is research necessary, and what's you guys' experience with research during the application process?
I'm general surgery, and I was definitely told research was an absolute must. You're not gonna match into surgery without research. Personally, I got into a lot of research projects, but I wasn't able to publish anything in medical school. Just based on the fact that I'm an IMG, I would have to have done extra, and I'm Canadian. A lot of research, if you're doing research with NIH, you can't unless you're an American citizen, things like that. So I did get involved in research projects, so I do have research experience in writing proposals and things like that, but I did not have any actual publications. I think I still interviewed well at really good places, and they just didn't mention research, and I didn't have research. They didn't ask me anything about research, and yeah.
There you go. How about you, Kai?
Yeah, all my research actually was before I even went to medical school. Like I didn't publish while I was in medical school. I did do, a good amount of research beforehand. So I think that like helped, but it doesn't come up. The only question I think they ask you is like, are you interested in research? Because they just want to make sure that when you get there that, you're gonna have to do some sort of research. In at least definitely in surgery, and I'm sure for most specialties, and like it's like an ACGME requirement that you do some sort of research project during your time. So, but I don't think it's an absolute must. Obviously, if you have the opportunity to and you're able to publish, and like that's really great. But I don't think it's a necessity. I also think that if you're applying to a lot of academic centers, I think that is a must. Like if you're, if you're okay with matching at like a smaller community-based hospital, that research is not their like top priority, then I think you'll be fine. But if you're trying to match at, Vandy or Duke or, any of the, these top programs, then then you definitely are going to need to have some sort of research experience.
Great. And this is Adema, our co-host. She just popped up. She was busy in the wards fighting Corona. So welcome.
Hello. Sorry to interrupt.
Hey, no problem. You didn't interrupt. So just last question here. I know whenever you hear surgery, I'm sure you guys are kind of sick of this, but when you hear surgery, I'm sure, people always talk about lifestyle and how busy you are and whether you'd be able to, fit in, family and all that. So what are your perspectives on this?
This was why I was trying to look for a mentor in particular, because you hear from people who are not in surgery about the lifestyle, and they encourage you not to. I have a very close family friend who is a hospitalist, and she would text me all the time, do not apply to surgery, don't do that to yourself. And when I started talking to female women in surgery, a lot of them would tell you like, no one that is not a surgeon is going to tell you to go into surgery. That's just not what they're going to do. Everyone is going to try to advocate for their own career. And I met a lot of them, and I realized at the end of the day, you want to be happy. My mentor told me, would you rather have all this time, but you're not even happy with what you do? Like you're in a specialty that you don't enjoy, you're not happy, you're not fulfilled. What's the free time doing for you if you're not a happy person? So she pretty much told me at the end of the day, it's about managing your residency is going to be the hardest part. She told me as an attendant, the job is just different. You can decide to go into private practice, decide to stay in academia, whatever you want. It's based on the kind of person that you are and what kind of lifestyle you want for yourself. So she pretty much advised me not to look at residency as what chooses a career for you, because residency is hard for everyone. Everyone is busy. It's the 80 hours for everyone. But after that, the kind of surgeon you want to be, it just depends on what you want to go into. Breast surgeons have a nice life, 9 to 5, 5 days a week. Plastic surgery is different. Every kind of surgery is different. So she pretty much told me like, do what you love, and the whole lifestyle thing, your life, she's like, this is part of your life. So if you love it, you're going to be a happy person. If you don't, doesn't matter what you're doing, you can have free time and you're still unhappy. So.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. And even like now kind of seeing, because obviously, especially as a woman, like you get considered, especially if you want to like have a family and all that sort of stuff. But I saw so many women who were doing it, and I was just like, okay, well, I mean, obviously it can be done, and even now seeing, some of my attendings in their various specialties, some of them have like the most amazing work-life balance. Like they're in clinic like 3 days a week, they're operating a couple of days a week, and like they're going on vacations with their families, and they're doing all the things that everyone else does. So of course, early on in your career, but this just goes for no matter what specialty you go in, when you're a young new attending, like your life is not going to be the greatest, but over time, like you're able to ask for more, get more, and you know, and kind of create the lifestyle that you want. You know, if you want to work 80 hours a week, then you're able to do that. But if you want to have a beautiful work-life balance, then you're also able to do that too. So.
Great. Right now, at 2:50 thereabouts, I think we'll start to have people from the next surgical group coming in. But we did get one more question from the chat, if that's okay with you guys. And we'll try to manage this transition as smoothly as possible. If you guys want to stick around, you can. If you want to dip out, you can, which I imagine with Carrie, you have a shift and everything, and you guys have spent an hour with us. But here's the question. Somebody was asking, I think this was directed at you, Carrie. So if you're applying to more than one specialty, how do you come off as not being nonchalant of one versus the other? And I know you applied to, you said OB-GYN as well. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as you know why you're applying to both, then you know you should be able to come off passionately about both. You know, there's obviously something in both fields that you loved, and so as long as you're able to speak to that, then I think you'll be fine. One thing is that you never have to answer the question of like, where else are you applying? Because that's like an illegal question. And so, and you never have to, you know, answer the question of like, are you applying to any other specialties? That's also illegal as well. What I would not advocate is applying to this to the same program, like the same hospital in different specialties, because you will get found out. And so I definitely wouldn't do that. But I mean, as long as you just, you know, there's so many things about OB-GYN that I still absolutely love. And I applied both. And if I would have matched an OB, like I would have been happy still, because I still loved both fields. I'm much happier matching in surgery because that was my number one choice. But I think as long as you're able to speak to what you love about each field, and you have, it's always, make sure you always have, for one other thing for interviews, always have a good like patient encounter ready, like kind of in your pocket, to kind of drive home the fact of why you want to go into that field specifically. And as long as you're able to articulate that and articulate your passions and what specifically drives you to that field, I think you'll be fine.
Excellent. Thank you. That was right on time. And I don't know, Adama, did you have any questions? Okay, great. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Carrie and Amara, for joining us. I know you guys are busy, but appreciate the time. Stay safe out there. And if you guys have anything you want to pub, any social media, any events, go ahead, let us know now. If not, then no.
I got nothing. You can follow me, but that's like all I got.
Great. Thank you all so much. I think everyone appreciated it. And you can go ahead and leave as you please. I'm going to invite the next crew on. Again, thank you so much.
Welcome,
Guys.
All right, guys. So the next crew, the next person is Shanique. Hey, Shanique, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, that was a nice seamless transition. I don't know if you're watching on the YouTube.
Yeah, I was watching, so I joined a little early.
Perfect. It's just you and, well, for everyone watching, this is Shanique Martin. She's going to UW Seattle next year for plastics. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, love UW. I went there for my rotation. Love Seattle. So,
yeah, it's a fun place.
Great. And for everyone watching who just logged on, I'm Nelson. I'm one of the co-hosts of Black Kids, White Coats, and this is my co-host Adama. Go ahead and introduce yourself. All right, so we're missing Chi-Chi right now. She's busy with class, or Lilian, as we all know her. But we'll go ahead and get started with Shanique in plastics. So first of all, Shanique, go ahead, tell us about your journey in as little, as many words as you'd like, just a kind of summary of your journey.
Okay, I guess I'll start from the beginning. I'm originally from Jamaica. That's where I was born. I lived there until I was 11. Then my family moved to Miami. I did middle school, high school in Miami. Then I went out to the West Coast to Stanford for undergrad. After undergrad, I worked for a year in health tech, and then decided to go back to Stanford for med school. So for me, like my path to medicine, it took a little while to get there. I always had an interest in sciences growing up. In high school, I thought I wanted to be a marine biologist. So when I came to Stanford, that was sort of the path I was on. And then after exploring that quite a bit, I decided I didn't want to do that anymore. I majored in chemistry and started being really drawn to drug design and development. And I really enjoyed that, actually. I really, for quite some time, considered doing a PhD and sort of going the pharmaceuticals route. However, after interning at a pharmaceutical company, I realized that you put a lot of effort into making a drug, but then you don't really see what happens to it after it leaves your lab bench. And that didn't sit very well with me. And so I sort of pursued more clinical experiences, volunteering, that sort of thing, and decided I wanted to go to med school. And so that's how I ended up applying to med school. Because I mean, going into med school, I didn't know what specialty I wanted to do. I sort of was attracted to surgery and surgical specialties because I enjoyed working with my hands. That's sort of something that stuck with me from doing my lab work. I liked just feeling like I was being hands-on and doing something, making something. And then it wasn't until my third year of rotations where I decided I wanted to do plastic surgery after doing an elective in the specialty. That was quite late in my third year. I'd say it was about April of third year. And so what I decided to do was actually take a research year after that year, because plastic surgery is very competitive. And having that research year, getting sort of some background in plastic surgery specific research is really beneficial in terms of boosting your application. And so I did that. Thankfully, I had the opportunity to do that at my school. I know not everyone has that opportunity. But it was something I was able to take advantage of. And I think it really helped me match where I wanted to go.
Wow, amazing. And I'm sure you're able to kind of wow a lot of people during interviews with your story. That's kind of a very amazing story. And I'm sure throughout that whole process, you encountered some hardships. Can you go ahead and tell us about some of the hardships you encountered, maybe the most kind of poignant one, and how you overcame that?
I guess I would say, I mean, all sort of my journey towards plastic surgery has been a lot of ruling out other things, as opposed to sort of like, some people are like, they were born to be a neurosurgeon. I wasn't one of those people. I wasn't born to be a plastic surgeon, I don't think. I think there are a number of things that I could have been really good at. And I think that's one of the most challenging things about my journey, is actually sort of that switching, realizing that something wasn't for me after it already sort of started going down that path. And so it's not one specific, very challenging moment. It's a lot of little challenging moments along the way. And sort of realizing, I mean, when you really are passionate about something, then you realize it really isn't a good fit. It's really tough to sort of like switch after you've put in so much time and effort in pursuing that thing. And so I think finally, I found plastic surgery. It's what I meant to do. But it definitely took a lot of ruling out other things, and those moments were quite challenging.
Amazing. And one thing I thought when you were saying you did, kind of pharmacology kind of field, I'm sure that was an easy class for you in med school.
Oh, yes, definitely very easy. I mean, as a chemistry major, I definitely knew a lot more about molecules and bonds and all those things, and just already having some experience in drug design development. It's funny actually learning in med school about one of the drugs that Genentech was working on when I interned there. It's crazy. It's like now it's actually being used clinically, and it wasn't. It was still in testing when I was an intern. So sort of crazy to see that transition.
That's awesome. All right, so tell me about mentorship. Obviously, it's very important in the process, and I'm sure you had some mentors that helped you get to where you are today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think mentorship is extremely important. It's important to have mentors in the specialty that you're planning to apply into, but also just mentors for general life stuff. I don't think, at least for me, I didn't have like a mentor that sort of checked all the boxes in terms of all the different aspects of my life that I'm trying to optimize for. And so I think it's important to sort of recognize sort of what the limitations of each of your mentors are in terms of what aspects they're best suited to help you with. And so for me, I had mentors that weren't even in plastic surgery. The Dean of Admissions at Stanford is one of my mentors. I had mentors in general surgery, in plastic surgery, of course. And then I also had research mentors in plastic surgery and more sort of like clinical career mentors in plastic surgery. And so I think recognizing sort of what the limitations of each of those mentors are, and also what they're getting out of it, right? I mean, I think what your research mentor wants for you is going to be very different from what your clinical career mentor wants for you. Your research mentor may want you to stay in the lab for another 2-3 years, but that doesn't align with your career goals. And so that's not the person you should be taking your career advice from, you know?
Sure. Awesome. So you do have a unique track and that you took the research year. So you can tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah. So again, like I said, I sort of decided I wanted to do plastic surgery late in my med school career. So April of third year is very late to decide you want to do something as competitive as plastic surgery.
That speaks to your kind of your strength as an applicant. You're able to accomplish that so late.
Yes. So thankfully at Stanford, there's the funding and there's sort of already this setup here for med students to take a research year pretty easily. The majority of Stanford med students actually take a research year, at least 1 year doing research, because it's such a research heavy academic program. But for me, I knew I wanted to do 1 year and 1 year only. And so I was very upfront about that when I was looking for research mentors, because I think it's very important to make sure that your goals are aligned with their goals. And they understand that you do not plan on spending more time than you need to in the lab. And so my research year, I spent primarily doing breast reconstruction clinical research. And so I think clinical research is something you can certainly do in a shorter amount of time. Basic science is a lot hard to get, like actually design a study, conduct a study, analyze the data, and publish within 12 months. It's really difficult to do that in basic science, but clinical research is a little bit easier, especially if you do retrospective chart reviews and that sort of thing. And so I did a lot of chart reviews, designed a few prospective studies that now other students are carrying out for me, now that I'm no longer really on campus doing much. But I think it was very important to have that time. It was a nice break in med school also. I traveled a lot during my research year because doing clinical research, all I really needed was my computer and internet access. So I could do the chart reviews, and so I could work from anywhere, which was really nice to have that flexibility, especially going into residency where that flexibility will no longer exist. But yeah, I think doing research is definitely beneficial. I tried to do a lot of a combination of shorter projects and more long-term projects, so that I could have some abstracts submitted for the plastic surgery national meeting, so I could have some presentations on my belt before ERAS submissions, as well as have some papers already in the pipeline in terms of submissions.
Awesome. So it sounds like that was a very productive research year, and you were kind of, in hindsight, you'd do it all over again.
Oh, certainly. I think going into med school, I was like, I'm not doing a research year if I don't need to. And then I realized I needed to. And I'm very thankful that I did. But I still stand by, if you don't need to take a research year, if you speak to your mentors and your application is strong enough, you have demonstrated enough interest in your specialty, by the time it gets to late third year, just apply. You can't get that year of your life back. And for me, I think I would do it again because I was sort of, my CV was where it was. I didn't have a lot of plastic surgery specific background. I think I could have applied in general surgery and been just fine, I think. Or OBGYN, which is what most of my research had been in prior to deciding I wanted to do plastic surgery. But because I didn't have anything plastic surgery specific on my CV, I needed to do the research year.
Got it. And one of the live chat questions we just got was, so did you do research your M1 and M2 year as well, or did you only do research that research year?
Yes, I did research starting M1 year. Stanford requires that med students do research. You need to do at least one project, but as I said, like, it's a very research heavy school, so most people do more than one project. I started out with OBGYN and pediatric infectious disease research that I did in Kenya, my M1 year. And so that was predominantly what I had worked on, as well as some smaller gen surge projects. And then third year, yeah.
Great. Go ahead.
And I have a question for you too. And this is bouncing off one of the questions that we got on the live chat. Say, for instance, someone who may not have a plastics department at their institution. Like for me, the only plastics I got was like my 1 week random elective that they gave me. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Like it's more than just, you know, what people think of in terms of like breast augmentations and like BBLs. There's so much diversity in the field of plastics. So do you have any advice for someone who may not necessarily have those same resources?
Yeah, I think, I mean, definitely along the interview trail, I encountered a lot of applicants who didn't have plastic surgery departments at their schools. And so I think if you realize that you have an interest in plastic surgery just from small amount of exposure that you've had, I think definitely reaching out to people in the community. If there isn't a program at your school, there definitely are plastic surgeons in the community. And so I think reaching out, shadowing them, getting their advice is definitely helpful. As well as if there are other, I mean, plastic surgery is a big proponent of doing away rotations. And so if you decide you want to do plastic surgery, you can always apply to do away rotations at hospitals that have strong plastic surgery programs.
Great. And kind of to cap off to talk about research. So, you know, what do you think is the climate in terms of the number of, you know, research activities, number of publications that you've heard through pipeline that's kind of adequate for plastics?
I don't know if there's any specific number. People, I think on the application sort of process and in the interview trail, people want to see that you've a demonstrated interest in the specialty, a demonstrated interest in seeing the specialty move forward. And the best way to do that is through research. And so I think if you are able to get your hands on not just like small projects that could have been done in a couple of weeks, you have to have it demonstrate that you can do case reports, you can write case reviews, but you can also design and conduct a full retrospective study, like, and analyze the data. You have to show sort of breadth in terms of the different types of projects that you're doing, as well as really being able to speak to those things. That being said, I don't think any program has a cutoff like minimum 10 publications. I didn't have 10 publications in plastic surgery applying. I think it's just showing that you have like projects that you've really thought about and have taken the lead on and being able to speak about those things. I definitely think for the initial application process, it's very helpful to have something on that. Like you could be working on a project till Thy Kingdom Come. And if it's nowhere on your ERAS application, then no one will know about it. You won't be selected for an interview. And so I think it's important to definitely have those smaller projects that you can get a publication out very quickly. So you have a line there so that when they're quickly browsing through your application, they can see, oh, she did some research in plastic surgery, just see a couple things. And then when you get on the interview, then you can talk about this bigger project that you're working on. You're still writing it up and you haven't presented it yet, that sort of thing.
Great. So kind of moving on, you know, you're so busy with research and class and everything. How did you prep for step 1 and step 2 board exams?
So step 1, I took immediately after second year. Wow, this was a long time ago. Right. I don't even remember how many weeks I studied. I think maybe 7 or 8 weeks, something like that. But my Stanford gives you unlimited amount of time off as long as you want to take step 1. There's no sort of time frame. I know, or we're very nice. Let us do whatever we want to do in some ways. But I studied for it. I went into step 1 with a plan. And I think it's very important to have a plan and a schedule going into step 1. Stanford doesn't teach to first aid or to the tests. They're very, very much about like, we're teaching you information that is on the cutting edge of medicine and science. Like you need to know what you're going to encounter when you reach your clinical rotations and you're actually practicing. Some of the step 1 knowledge is like, it's very Googleable. And Stanford's like, you're not paying tens of thousands of dollars to learn stuff that you can just Google. So for me, step 1 was very much of like a lot of the information was new when I entered my study period. And so I felt that in order to get through all of that information, I needed to have a schedule and I needed to stick with it. as long as it was working for me. And so I'd spoken to upperclassmen who had already taken the test, gotten examples of their study schedules, and used that to sort of formulate my own based on resources that I knew already worked for me, resources that I already used during M1 and M2 year. I tried not to introduce any new resources because I think that can be an added challenge, especially if you realize weeks into using that resource that like it doesn't fit your learning style. So I think it's important to choose your resources and know what works. Like that's what M1 and M2 year is really for. That's when you try out osmosis, Pathoma, Sketchy Micro, everything. Try it out, and then if you realize that you're one of those people that Sketchy Micro and Sketchy Farm doesn't work for you, Lord bless your soul. I don't know how you're going to learn it, but if it works for you,
I'm with you, Shani.
But like if you like you want to know that it doesn't work for you early on. Decide, like, you know, otherwise you're just going to be going around in circles and like not really like learning anything from it. But if it works for you, then it's great, right? Yeah, then you can it's like better to know that stuff ahead of time. And so I think, yeah, I knew which resources worked for me, made a schedule so that I could get through first aid. At least I went through first aid once, like very detailed, like line by line, and then had a couple weeks to sort of go back and like focus on specific areas that I felt were still weak when I was doing my practice tests. Yeah, and then I also scheduled breaks. Like I think it's important to schedule your breaks when you're studying for step one. Schedule your breaks, schedule exercising. Like I had my workout every morning. I was on there, it's like blocked out time. And then I blocked out 30 minutes for lunch where I'm not allowed to look at any books. And then I set a time, like you need to, I think people can try and study until like 2 a.m. No, like you have weeks to study. It's not very effective to be pulling all-nighters for weeks to try and learn this material. You need to be able to sleep well so that you can actually like consolidate all the information that you tried to learn that day. And so I had a strict, like at 9:30 p.m., book closes, I'm done for the day. I don't look at anything. I watch a couple episodes of TV and then went to bed. And that was my schedule. And I gave myself 1 day off a week. Yes. Where I didn't do any studying at all. And I could see my friends and family. So that's how I did step one studying. Step two was a bit more challenging because I took step two this past December.
After your research year.
After my research year, when I was already on interviews. So would not recommend.
And that's both CK and CS.
Yes, I took them a week apart. Oh yeah. Would not recommend. I think certainly if I could go back, I would have probably taken step two before I took my research year, when I still knew stuff about like internal medicine, which, I mean, I took that early on in third year and then took the test almost 2 years after I'd already done my internal medicine rotation, right?
Yeah.
So there was a lot of relearning that had to happen. And also because I didn't have a lot of dedicated time because I'd already started traveling for interviews, that made it really difficult to study. That being said, I did find that studying for step two was a little bit easier than step one because it's a lot more clinical reasoning, which it's a skill that you learn when you're on your rotations, regardless of the type of rotation you're on, you learn how to clinical reason. And so I think step two is a little bit easier for that reason. And then CS, I think I just reviewed the first aid CS book.
Yeah.
Some of the cases for things like I hadn't done my psych rotation yet, so I needed to look through that stuff. Okay. Just like to really familiarize myself with the things that I didn't really know, and then doing the basics on test day. Make sure you wash your hands before you touch your hands. You will lose points.
That's plus one.
It's the little things in CS, like it's a clinical reasoning, but also, you know, speak fluent English. You get graded on how well you speak English, and then also washing your hands, being kind, compassionate, even though it's actors, but you know. Yeah,
of course. Okay, great. So we do have a couple questions, and this one question I'll ask it. I don't quite understand it, but hopefully you will. So someone is wondering, for students who don't quite meet the step one cutoffs, would you recommend pursuing an independent program instead of integrated? or is there still a way to match into an integrated program?
I think it depends on, so people aren't chosen based only on their step one score. And like, clearly that's going to change in a couple of years when there will no longer be a step one score. So I think programs are going to have to figure that out. I think programs, from what I have heard, I haven't been on the other side of this, of course, but that there is a cutoff, sometimes it's 235, 240 for step one for choosing people for interviews. That being said, I think most programs do utilize a holistic review process. And particularly in plastic surgery, it's a smaller specialty. It's not like gen surg where there are like thousands of applications to review. This year's in plastic surgery, 290 something people applied, which is way less. Yeah, that's it. 290, which is like, but there are not a lot of plastic surgery programs. So the match rate is still pretty low. But 296 programs will, like 296 applications, programs can easily they can actually use a holistic review and look beyond the step one score. That can be the initial thing, but then they go back and read your personal statement, look at your CV, what have you done? And so I think for that reason, I don't think there's a necessarily strict cutoff, even if they use one. That being said, independent programs still exist. And I think they will be around for quite some time still. I mean, a lot of them have been phased out, but the ones that are still here have been here for quite some time. And a lot of programs actually have both integrated and independent residents in their program. And so I think the best person you can talk to about this stuff is a mentor in plastic surgery. Someone in academic plastic surgery would probably be more better suited to help you with that decision in terms of how good of a candidate you would be for an integrated program versus independent, based on not just your step one score, but all the other aspects of your application. And I think, I mean, I can give my best guess, but I think definitely speak to your mentors, the people who are friends with the people who will be looking at your applications, people who look at applications themselves. They're going to be better suited to give you that sort of advice.
Great. So for me and for others who are, I'm not really sure, integrated versus independent, is that kind of the same thing as categorical versus advanced? And can you kind of speak on what that means?
So integrated plastic surgery residency is you start from day one. It's 6 years. There's no prelim year that's required or TY year or anything like that. You match into the program and you're there for 6 years. Some programs have an additional required research year. So it's a 6+1 program. But that's integrated plastic surgery residency. Independent plastic surgery residency, you do a general surgery residency. So you would apply to general surgery, match into general surgery, do a full general surgery residency, and then you do 3 years of plastic surgery. So then you apply into plastic surgery afterwards.
Oh, okay. How many years of general surgery? 2? Or
I think it's 3 minimum.
okay.
I think you have to have completed at least 3 years of gen surge before you can apply to independent.
Wow.
But someone else can fact check me on that. I only apply integrated, so.
It seems like integrated is kind of the more desired route.
Yes, it's definitely more desired. You start doing plastic surgery a lot more early on. You still do a decent bit of general surgery as an integrated plastic surgery resident. Most programs you do about 1.5 years of general surgery, but then after that it's all plastic surgery, and you do sprinkle in a little bit of plastic surgery even starting your intern year.
Okay. And there's no second application?
No, that's it, unless you want to do fellowship.
Sweet. Okay, another question we have. So somebody said, I think that Stanford is a true pass, but can you comment on the schools with AOA and the expectation for that?
I don't know. Yeah, Stanford has no AOA. So I'm not quite sure. I'm not suited to answer that. I don't really know much about it and how much it matters.
That's fair. Okay, so kind of moving forward to third year, can you speak on your experience with picking an away rotation and how many you did and how you excelled during those, and any tips you have for future plastic surgeons?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I did 2 away rotations, one of them at University of Washington in Seattle, and the other one was at Northwestern in Chicago.
When
So,
was your UW?
pardon?
When was your UW rotation? was-
August, September.
Oh, I was there as well.
Oh.
August, September.
I was
What department?
Radiology, so I was in the dungeon.
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't have seen radiologists at all. So I chose those programs. I think people optimize for different things for your away rotations. I think the like best advice that I got for away rotations was to choose a place that you truly are interested in either going to or learning more about. Don't choose programs for away rotations because of how prestigious they are, their reputation, or like, it's a #1 program, so I gotta go. Based on like, you gotta look at your application, sort of see, like, you have to get a sense of like where you fall. Are you gonna be a top candidate? Are you like in the middle tier, lower tier? Where are you going to fall? Then look at programs. And then also think about where are those programs located? What sort of things about those programs do you like? Do they have like a strong county hospital and you're really interested in like spending a lot of time at a county hospital? Is it a larger program, a smaller program? One person per year versus 4 people per year? These are the things you have to think about. I chose my programs because I knew I had a preference to stay on the West Coast if I could. But coming from Stanford, that was already sort of one check on the West Coast mark. And so I went up to University of Washington because it has a phenomenal plastic surgery program. They have a really strong county hospital associated with UW, so Harborview. Lots of trauma, serving a large patient population. And I wanted to see what Seattle was all about. I mean, being in the Bay Area, that's one tech hub. Seattle is another one. So that's how I chose UW. And then Northwestern, for me, I wanted to get a sense of sort of, I knew I liked the city of Chicago, and it was somewhere I could definitely see myself living. But Northwestern is a very different program from University of Washington. It's a lot smaller. University of Washington takes 4 people per year. Northwestern takes 2, so it's a smaller program. The plastic surgery department doesn't rotate at a county hospital, but it's right in the middle of the city. And it has a really good reputation. They do require a research year. They have a strong research background and facilities there for the residents to take advantage of. So for me, away rotations were I chose based on places that I could see myself living potentially, and then programs I was truly curious about based on speaking to my mentors. There are people at Stanford who have matched at University of Washington. There are faculty who graduated from Northwestern, and so I spoke to those people and got a sense of sort of what those programs are like and if they may be good fit. And I liked that they ended up being 2 very different programs because it helped me decide sort of what really I like wanted out of those 6 or 7 years of residency. Like having like, like you can say you want a strong county hospital experience, but then when you actually get there and you realize like it's really tough and the residents are like, this is like, it's kind of brutal, like they're overworked, they have a lot of hours, that sort of thing. And it's like hard to know that until you're actually like in that setting. And that's what the away rotation's for. It's not just about you like looking great and, like being impressive and people liking you. That's part of it. But also a lot of it is like, can you see yourself actually here, working here day in, day out with these people in this setting? That's what it's for both. It's both for the programs and it's for you.
Awesome. Kind of piggybacking off of that, how did you set yourself apart in a plastic surgery away rotation?
I think I'm a very like chill person. I'm not a gunner as a lot of people may be. And so I went into rotation saying I was going to be myself. I'm not going to put on this fake face of being like, oh, I'm a super helpful person. Like I did like the common sense stuff that I did on my surgery rotations. Be helpful when you can, but don't be annoying. Like know when to ask questions, know how to read the room. And so I think what sets people apart isn't that they do something special when they're on rotations. It's like you be yourself and you're relaxed and you truly do get along with the people that you're working with. You are helpful when they need you to be helpful. You don't need your hand held all the time. I think just being a nice, calm person and knowing how to read the room and being helpful is what you do. And like, I don't know if that helped me like stand out or just like seem okay. Like I don't really know, but that's what I did. And I think definitely, I mean, a lot of the stuff that, I mean, everyone's going to tell you, read about your patients. Before you go in the operating room, you need to know who's on that table. Why are they here? What's their history? Why are they getting this procedure? What are the alternatives to this procedure? Are they going to get chemotherapy, radiation afterwards? Like, how do those factors play into the choice of the procedure that we're doing? Know about the procedure, know your anatomy, like it's the basic stuff, really that stuff. And like, that just shows that you're prepared, you're interested, and talk to the attendings and, you know, like be nice to them. Don't be super annoying, of course, but talk to them, be friendly, be helpful, assist in the operating room, help to wheel the patient back, grab warm blankets. It's really like the basic stuff. Don't ask to be doing too much. Like, no one's going to ask you to elevate the flap because you're still a student. But if you're asked to close the belly, you should be able to suture pretty well.
Sweet. Okay, so that's a nice kind of a place to transition. So suturing, right? How did you practice suturing throughout med school? What advice do you have for budding surgeons on suturing? Like, you know, how did you get good at it?
So I took a few surgical electives. So I got, I learned how to like knot tie in the first like couple months of med school because I knew I had an interest in surgery. I wasn't sure what surgical specialty. And so I got started very early. I think what's very, very helpful, what helped me was becoming friends with some residents. You know, like if you take those electives or if your surgery interest groups holds like a suturing session, whichever residents showed up to teach you all, like become friends with them. They may be able to help you to get your hands on a needle driver, some pickups, and little like skin pads so you can practice suturing and a few like expired sutures that you can use. I think those are that's like definitely the best resource. And that's where I got a few things. I spoke to one of the residents like, hey, you know, I want to do surgery. I really want to be able to practice. I know how to knot tie and know like basic sutures. Like, can you help me get my hands on some equipment? And they were very helpful. As if you don't want to spend money. You can also buy things on Amazon and stuff, but I didn't want to spend any money, especially since the hospital has a whole bunch of expired sutures that they're not using in patients lying around that some resident can get your hands on.
I like your way better. And we're paying tuition, so.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, great. So another question, kind of, you know, going on through the process. So interviews, right? Do you have any kind of tips for success on interviews, especially with plastics? And how do plastics interviews go?
So plastic surgery interviews are typically multiple, like they're not, I don't want to call them MMI, multiple mini interviews, but they kind of are. They are about, in my experience, they're anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes long. And they're mostly, well, it's a mix of either one-on-one interviews or mini panel interviews. So 2 or 3 faculty members or a mix of faculty members and residents with you, the student. At some programs, they had like each room had a specific question that they had to ask, but then they would also ask you the general stuff. Tell me about yourself, which reminds me, I don't want to forget this. Everyone should have their like 90-second spiel on like, tell me about yourself. You will be asked that everywhere. You need to have it ready to go. At the end of the interviews, it's going to feel like you're just a broken record. Try to like mix it up a little bit so it doesn't sound very rehearsed, but like you should have that ready to go. So they'll ask you those questions, and then some programs, again, like I said, had like specific questions that the room had to ask, and it was either a situational question or like tell me about like a really impactful case, or I was asked to draw an ear once. I didn't get asked to carve an ear, but I do know that at some interview they ask you to do that. Or they tell you about a defect or a situation in the OR, and they ask you like what you would do, what your next step would be, what your plan for reconstruction may be. So that's typically how the interviews are. And so again, it was anywhere from 3 of those mini panel interviews that are like 10 to 20 minutes in length, or I had one program where we had 12 or 15 like 10-minute interviews, and it was just back to back to back to back to back. That one was really exhausting.
Jeez.
Yeah, and then there's also the random like one interview where it sort of deviated from those smaller panels, and it was like large panels, like 4 rooms, and each room had like at least 7 faculty members, and then just you. So that was intimidating, but the majority of schools do smaller panels.
Got it. Great. Thank you for that. And we are approaching, we're a couple minutes away from the end of the interview. Want to, there are no questions in the chat, but I want to prompt anybody who has questions, feel free. It's the last couple minutes. But otherwise, thank you so much for your time. You gave some excellent keys and some gems there. And again, congrats on going to UW, Seattle. No problem. Adama, did you have any questions?
No, I'm good. Okay,
great. Thank you, Shanika. Stay safe out there. Did you have anything you wanted to plug? Any social media, any kind of initiatives, anything you're working on?
No, not right now.
Great. But again, thank you, and stay safe out there, okay?
Yeah, thanks, guys.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, we do have the next couple of people in the waiting room, which we could say. Yeah, and Adem, she has some patient work to do, the real life, resident life calls. Yeah, she'll be right back. And I will, in the meantime, I'll let the 2 ENT folks in. We have Connor and April coming in. April and I. Oh, what's up, April? What's up, Connor?
Hey, how's it going, man?
What's up, guys? Good.
Hey,
nice to meet you. Good to see you again, April.
Nice to see you as well.
Yeah, April and I are going to be at Vanderbilt.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be there in 2021. April's going right in.
Yeah.
So for everyone tuning in now, we had general surgery, and then we had plastics before this. Now we have ENT. My name is Nelson. I'm a co-host of Black is White Coats. My fellow co-hosts, there's Adama, and then Lily is busy with class, but we'll kind of be taking over. And we'll introduce the guest today, April. As I mentioned, she's going to ENT at Vanderbilt, and Connor as well. He's going to ENT at Michigan, correct?
Correct.
And ENT is ear, nose, and throat surgery, otherwise known as otolaryngology. But yeah, I'll kind of pass the mic to Adema. She's gonna kind of take the lead for this one.
Yeah, like ENT, because I was in the hospital, I always refer as like ENT. So if anyone ever asks me to spell otolaryngology, I'm screwed. But can you 2 tell me what, like, basically like your journey into medicine?
April, go ahead.
Yeah. So I guess for me, I had a lot of kind of personal experiences with working with vulnerable populations, and that really got me interested in public health. And kind of within that realm, I found that medicine was a really good opportunity to continue that passion while also working with patients directly, and potentially getting involved with policy and more community level interventions to help patients. And so that's kind of how I got interested in medicine initially.
Perfect. Yeah, I was growing up, I was always the kid that had that red like pillowcase wrapped around my neck trying to be the Superman. And my parents told me that, being a superhero isn't a real thing. And then I think from there, I kind of pushed myself into wanting to be a vet. And then they said that, vet's hard to do. And I think probably towards the end of elementary school, I kind of knew that I wanted to pursue a career in medicine. And from there, I mean, kind of like what April said, where you're just treating vulnerable, patient population, and just the vulnerability that you have with your patients is something that you won't find in any other specialty. And that was something that really, really attracted me to want to pursue a career in medicine.
Okay. And so as someone at my medical school, I literally got no ENT experience exposure. So can you 2 kind of give us insight of how you chose to go into ENT?
Yeah, so I can go ahead and start. So for me, we have very limited exposure as well. We get maybe 1 or 2 lectures during our preclinical years. But even those I thought were really interesting and engaging. We have this woman, our assistant PD is a woman, and she's the one that gave the lectures, Dr. Shaw, and she was really awesome. I felt like, seeing a woman in leadership in a surgical field was something I hadn't really seen before. So that was kind of the initial attraction. And then I think as I went on the wards, I actually didn't do an elective because it wasn't offered at the time. So my first experience was also kind of at the sub-I level, and feeling like the people I worked with were really awesome. Everyone really enjoyed what they did, which was important to me. I wanted to work with people who were passionate about the work that they did and enjoyed doing it. And then more so, I think ENT offers a lot of quality of life for patients. It's not just surgery, always to remove a cancer, although we do that as well, but it really focuses on how patients feel, helping them speak, sleep, breathe better, all of those things that really we take for granted until it affects you. And that was important to me to have kind of that job satisfaction in a career.
Yeah, a little bit different for us. I'm at Howard, and because Howard doesn't have an otolaryngology program, we had very limited exposure. So I actually came to Howard wanting to do pediatrics, and then after anatomy lab, I loved working with my hands. I knew that I always wanted to work with children, so I kind of switched over to pediatric surgery. But I still worked with a pediatric mentor, and I really loved the medicine side as well as the surgical side. So towards the end of my first year, we have one otolaryngology attending there, Dr. Ecology. And I went to her. I said, I'm kind of interested in kind of both surgery and medicine. And I heard otolaryngology was kind of a good mix. And she has a very busy clinic, and she does a lot in the OR. So she really let me tag along with her, and I got to work, extensively with her, kind of learning about the field. But when it came to working with residents and things like that, from being a student that doesn't have a home program, you really have to do a lot of ways to really get that experience, get the letters of recommendation and things like that, so you can match successfully.
So for people who like our M1s, M2s, who are not really at the away stage yet, are there any other resources you would recommend doing to help get their feet wet, to get more exposure?
I think kind of in those earlier years, the biggest thing you can really do would probably be to get involved with research. So if you have a home department, then your home department would be a good place to start. If you don't, and there's a neighboring institution nearby, getting involved with research with that institution would be really helpful. And then kind of with that, usually those people will allow you to come in their ORs once or twice, just to kind of get a feel of what the specialty is like. But I think at the M1, M2 level, that's probably the biggest thing, just because it is a research competitive field and people expect that you've done research. But I think at that level, that would be a good thing.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think for a first year and second year student, the most important thing is going to be, your grades. You want to make sure that you're here to learn medicine, and you need to make sure you're doing a great job learning that, while also trying to tap into doing a little bit of research. I think for otolaryngology, it's important that you have research. At the start, it doesn't necessarily have to be in otolaryngology, but just getting your feet wet with that and kind of balancing it out. You can also, like what April said, is kind of reaching out to, neighboring institutions, or if you have a home program, kind of talking to some of the attendings there, and tell them you're a first year or second year and you're really interested in kind of learning more, and they'll let you shadow. We like to consider ourselves the nice surgeons. So, I think I can speak for a lot of people when they say that they love to have students that are kind of willing to learn and kind of seeing what the field is like. So you can kind of get a good mix of both.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. And so do you have any advice in terms of like mentorship and reaching out, people who may be a little bit more introverted or shy? Do you have any tips for trying to get mentors?
This was something I really struggled with, I think, just because, mentorship is difficult. You really have to mesh well with that person, and there kind of has to be a fit from both sides. I think I found that some more, I've connected more with women in the field, and particularly like one of my great mentors, Dr. Amelia Drake. She's a senior faculty at UNC in PEDS. And I think once you find that person who you recognize is really invested in your success, reaches out to you as often as, maybe not as often, but reaches out to you as well as you reaching out to them, and it feels like a two-way street, and that usually is a pretty good fit. But it can be challenging at first when you're trying to get to know the department and people are really busy, and not everyone knows how to be a great mentor or is really interested in that. And so I think the biggest thing would be just not giving up and trying to, work with different people.
Yeah, I would agree. A lot of stuff I'll say echoes with April. I think for any field in medicine, mentorship is probably one of the most important things for us, is trying to be clinicians. I have a ton of mentors both in the field of otolaryngology and not. One of my mentors is a pediatrician, and she really got me ready in the preclinical years to working with patients. I have a mentor that does research. You kind of want to make sure that you're learning from, the people around you that are willing to help. I think when you're trying to find a mentor, you need someone that's, one, has the time to really mentor you, and two, kind of to align their goals with you, where your success is their success. And those are going to be kind of the best mentors that you can get. And it's important to kind of make your goals known to your mentor, where, we have a meeting coming up, kind of send them the outline of the questions that you have so they have time to kind of think about the topic, so you're not kind of wasting time, because, your mentors are busy people. They have work and things going on. So if you can kind of facilitate a lot of the stuff early on to make everything fluid, that's really important. Especially specifically for the field of otolaryngology. Let's say when I first went to Dr. Kalajai, I told him, I'm really interested in learning about the field. Can I work with you in clinic so I can get a good feel for the physical examination, where I want to become very proficient in the head and neck examination? And then she said, perfect. And then she got to watch how I did head and neck examinations, give me some criticisms and critiques and how I can do better, to really make sure that you're not just kind of floating in and just kind of passively learning, where everything's very, very active. And that will just excel you with where you need to go when it comes to that mentoring relationship.
And so, as you all know, surgical specialties, you do need to have those scores. Do you have any tips on step 1, step 2 resources that worked for you, or patterns that you think facilitated you to get those good board scores?
Yeah, so step 1 can be challenging for a lot of people, and particularly for minorities in medicine, which creates a barrier to sometimes getting into some of these competitive specialties. I think one of the biggest things is, obviously, Connor kind of mentioned this earlier, but working hard your first and second years and kind of laying that foundation strong. A little bit more concretely, something I did that I thought was really helpful, at least at my own institution, we kind of as a whole tend to struggle with step 1, and so we really start that third the semester before dedicated, we kind of start grinding for step 1 at that point. And so I made it a point to get through UWorld and stuff like that, kind of the semester leading up to dedicated. So I thought that was really helpful. Really, the prep, I would say the few weeks or so before dedicated was what I think made a difference in my score. And then, like I said, trying to continue to stay dedicated those first and second years. And relying on group studying, I'm a really big group studier, reaching out to friends and stuff like that, just to kind of keep you sane through the process, was really helpful, just for like mental health and wellness.
Yeah, and the step 1 grind can be very challenging. I think second years can get drowned in resources. And I think that one of the biggest mistakes that second years can do is try to use as many resources as possible. So, I mean, we could talk about kind of what resources we used, but I think the most important thing is kind of knowing what kind of studier you are. How do you learn information? Because everyone learns information differently. So the way that I studied for step 1 is going to be different than the way that April did and the way that you guys did and things like that. I think overarching, the resources that I tended to use is everyone uses first aid. Everyone uses Pathoma, and Pathoma is great because it's a quick kind of summary of pathology. I also used a in-depth pathology book. A lot of people use Robbins or Goljan Rapid Review. And don't read this cover to cover, kind of use this as a way to kind of learn information that you're struggling with. So if I had a topic like, something with the liver and I wanted to get more information on, I would just use that just to kind of drill that information in. It's also important, questions. The more questions you do, statistically increase your scores. So getting through all of the UWorld, you want to make sure that you're doing that, and don't just do it to memorize the answers. Do it to know, because for these tests, they can't really change the information that they're testing you on. They can only change the way they ask those questions. So when you're going through your questions, you want to make sure you know, why are these answers right? And then why are these answers wrong? And kind of play around with the question stem so you can make the other answers right. So you're really doing a great job learning from those question banks. And the last thing is, I'd recommend doing something for spatial review. To have the whole second year and first year to kind of study for step 1. You'll be surprised on how quickly you can learn information and then forget it. So it's something for spatial review. I used Anki. And I found that was a great help because it kind of made sure that you were always going back through some old questions and kind of learning from that stuff. So you're learning it and then maintaining it for the test. And then, of course, like April said, your dedicated time in group study, and you want to make sure you keep yourself sane. The dedicated time is stressful, especially if you're interested in a very competitive specialty. You think that your step 1 kind of defines you. And, we can talk more about how that isn't always the case. But it's very, very stressful, and you want to make sure that you're still taking the time to, take care of yourself and do the stuff that you still love while, still working hard.
And side note, for those of you that are tuning in that think once you take step 2 it's over, you can delete your UWorld. You're gonna need it for step 3 too. So
you can delete it,
forever.
but you gotta you can delete it because membership is gonna lapse. But go ahead, sign back up. Come enter you.
I deleted it at my first day of residency. They were like, "So did you download UWorld?" I was like, "You who? You where?" So don't
Forever.
on UWorld. She or he is gonna be your best friend, your lover until the end of first year of residency.
Yeah, you
Um,
will.
yeah, it's the best. You could do it in the grocery store. We're not being they don't give us a check for this. So
I was gonna
download.
say, it's expensive too, but it's an investment. It's worth it.
Something to look into for residency too. Some programs will reimburse your UWorld. So mine did. So that $430 came back in my pocket, and then I charged my brother for him to use my UWorld. So I only paid like $100. Yeah. So yes, I charged him. Of course, I charged him, and I charged him on my master the boards too.
I was lucky. My school paid for it, both for step 1 and step 2. So I was lucky.
Oh. But yeah, so things to look into. But back to the topic at hand. So one of the questions on the chat, speaking of step scores, they're wanting to know what is the lowest score that you have seen that has matched.
That's kind of tricky because a lot of people, I would say, probably aren't 100% transparent if they have lower scores or even higher scores. I have a friend that is pretty open about her scores, and she matched with a 230 after getting like over 260s on step 2. So a huge improvement between the two. But other than that, I mean, I can't really comment. I think the number is important, but really what your application looks like as a whole, and kind of talking to your mentors to determining, if this is my score, there are other options if you get a lower score. Research years are always a great way to boost your application. Doing aways and doing really well on them. Certain programs don't screen for step 1 scores. And so if you go there and kill an away and show that you're a hard-working person who's really smart and just didn't do well in one exam, then, people can look past that. So I think, it's challenging because we don't, at least as medical students and applicants, we don't have that data, like what is the lowest score that someone's matched necessarily, but recognizing that it is just one piece of your application, and people tend to look at the whole application. So research, letters of recommendation, things like that can help boost a weaker step score for sure.
Yeah, and I agree with that. From a program director and a chairman, I heard that the lowest score that they've matched into their program was a 198. I've heard people match with a 10 or 203. I mean, like April said, and I'm going to say this over and over again, your step 1 score does not define you as an applicant. You're submitting this whole document that has your whole life in it. It's going to have, of course, your standardized test scores, but it's going to have, what people thought about you on rotations. It's going to have your community service. It's going to have a lot of stuff, and there's ways around getting through any of that. Like if you have, don't have a lot of research, but you have a lot of community service. You have a poor, step 1 examination, but you have a lot of community service. I mean, there's so many different ways. So I just always stress that some programs, they do have step 1 cutoffs, and a lot of programs don't. And it's just kind of being strategic with how you're applying with your application, and really knowing your application so you can apply smart is going to be one of the important things when applying into competitive specialties.
Okay, I know what I know now. If a 203 matched, you might see me at Vanderbilt or University of Michigan next year. What's up? But yeah, okay. So next question. Someone, as a follow-up question to that last one, said, would a competitive step score kind of cover up any poor medical school like grades? And I know that's a little complicated because some schools are strictly pass fail and then some rank. So based on your medical schools, have you seen the trend? Do you believe that to be true?
I feel like just kind of anecdotally on the trail, it seems like most people that I met, get honors, high pass, and most things as far as grades go. I think that's probably around normal. I'm sure, you know, if you get passes, that's not going to make you not able to match necessarily. As far as if you have a really high score, I think it probably gets you in the door, because I do think that some places screen based off of just your step score. But if you did, you know, really poorly, you know, maybe all passes or failed potentially some courses in your clerkships, then that probably could hurt you. But again, I think it's kind of just like what your whole application looks like. Maybe you were going through something at that time that made those grades lower. You know, there might be reasons as to why that happened. And so I think, again, kind of what we've talked about is it probably really is the entire application. And also your letters. If your letter writers are really advocating for you and are strong in the field, that can really make up for a lot of weaknesses in your application.
Yeah, and again, no one thing can define your application as an applicant. You know, if you end up doing poorly on step one and you have amazing, you know, you do amazing third year, and again, like April said, you have amazing letters of recommendation and you worked really hard at your OAs, they'll be like, well, you know, the poor step one, but look at all this other stuff. So
What happened? Oh,
I
no.
think we lost him for a little bit here. Might come back. But he had a very important point. And actually somebody asked that question just now. Yeah, so, you know, having a low insert, you know, whatever, step score, clinical grades, you can always kind of balance it out, average it out with something else. So always put your best foot forward. Let's see if we can get him back here.
Come back, Connor.
I just him to let him know that he's frozen.
Okay, thank you.
Zoom back in soon.
But yeah, and he was on the point too. Yeah, roll too.
Hashtag
But,
free Connor.
yeah.
Oh, no.
I think he'll probably come back.
Yeah, I'll watch out for him.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Watch out
Okay.
for what he's doing.
Okay, so April, as our lone ENT surgeon for now, if you don't,
We back.
he's
We
back.
back. We back.
All right, some internet problems over here.
You on
Oh,
Spectrum?
good.
Yeah, but I mean, I think again, it's important to really balance out your stuff, because you can make some mistakes and things like that. But just stay true to yourself, know who you are, work hard, and you can work through some of the stuff, and then just be ready to talk about it. Be honest in the interviews and say, you know what, I had this thing going on step one, or, you know, this happened, I just wasn't prepared enough for this, and I learned this from this, and this is why this won't happen again.
And I think to echo Connor, that's just very important just in the interview trail, because you might have some weaknesses, but you need to buffer them and say, well, this is what I learned, or this is how I grew, or this is a trend that shows my improvement, instead of just saying it is what it is and just leaving it as kind of a number. Because if you make it to the interview, they want to see you. So, you know, this is your chance to kind of prove your presence in person and showing why you are a strong candidate. But speaking of interviews, if you both don't mind sharing how many you applied to, and even how many you went on, if that's something you feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah, so I took the approach of applying very broadly. I really didn't have any geographic restrictions, you know, so I applied to, I think, 78 programs, around 80, and went on 18 interviews, which was a lot, and I don't think was probably necessary in hindsight. But, you know, at the time, you're just like, you want to match, you don't know what's going to happen. Anything can happen in this crazy process. And so you kind of count your blessings, and I think most people went on more than they probably think was necessary at this point, now that we've already matched. And I think I would say most of my friends on the interview trail had a similar approach, applied to about that many programs and went on close to that many interviews.
Yeah, and because I don't have a home program, I had to be very aggressive as well with applying. So I actually applied to 70 ENT programs, and I went on 19 interviews. And my thought process with applying to the programs that I did, where I wanted to make sure that I applied to, you know, high tier schools, middle tier schools, and low tier schools, to make sure that I had a good balance. I think that that's important, because you just never know how the match process is going to end up, and you want to make sure that you cover your bases with all of that. And, you know, you might end up loving a middle tier school over a higher tier school because you just didn't mesh well with certain people, and you just want to keep your options open. So that's kind of the strategy that I used. Again, I didn't really have, I would go anywhere. I wanted a job. So I would go to California if I want. I'm originally from the Michigan area. But I would go to California if I needed a job. So I applied, like April said, very broadly as well. And I think most people applying into otolaryngology do tend to apply broadly, but be different to others and loans and things. So then
we thought you froze again.
Did I freeze?
A little bit.
Like a micro freeze.
I was gonna say, don't sleep on California. I'm in LA right now and it's 80 degrees. Don't sleep on us. I heard it's like -70 where you at in Michigan.
Oh, in Michigan right now, huh, Connor?
Oh no.
Frozen again.
You know.
Oh, we're back.
Oh, he's back. How
There you
cold
go.
is
Am I back? I don't know what's going on.
I don't know either. Sometimes Zoom, man. Sometimes it just freezes. But you're back. You're back now.
Yeah, you back. How cold is it in Michigan?
I mean, it snowed today. We had a little bit of flakes. So we're low 30s today, but
I'm sorry. You said 30?
We'll heat up. We'll heat up.
August.
I mean, in Chicago, it's like 37, so it's not much better.
Yeah, y'all are about the same, honestly.
You said 37?
37. It was low key. It was like 70 last week, like 80 something.
I'm not gonna show my receipt. The sun is shining. Anyways, do you have any advice just based on the interview trail on putting your best foot forward, what it was like?
First thing, the interview trail is a lot of fun. You meet a lot of really great people. And Connor and I met at both of our Michigan interview. And I think, we have like a really close knit group of friends. So I think just first and foremost, like have fun. The people you meet are going to be awesome. They're future colleagues. That was something I knew kind of going in, but didn't really know how great it would be. So, but kind of beyond that, as far as just on the interview itself, how to do well, I think Connor mentioned this a little bit, but really knowing yourself and knowing like, what is my mission? What are my goals? Like, what are the things that I'm passionate about? And how can I best convey that to a program? For me, at the end of an interview, I wanted people to know, one or two things about me that were really important to me that I hope to not only bring to the residency program, but also show them that I've been dedicated to throughout my medical school career. So I think having that mission and kind of that statement about you and kind of that aligns with your goals and your visions as, who you are as a person is really important. And I think that sticks with people when they make their rank list. They remember, oh, April is the one who's going to do X, Y, and Z when she gets here. And so kind of leaving them with that, I thought was really valuable.
Yeah, and be true to yourself. Don't change yourself and change the way you answer questions based on what you think that they want to hear. You as yourself, you're an applicant. They picked you for a reason. If you're getting the interview, they already know that you can handle the rigor of residency. So they just want to see, are you going to be a great fit and are you a genuine person and whatever it might be. So don't try to cater your answers because a lot of times that can come off as disingenuous and they can pick up on that. That being said, when you're at your interviews, you want to make sure that, again, like we said, you put your best foot forward, smile even when you're tired, just be very personable, be respectful. I've seen some people on the trail that aren't super respectful and things like that, and it comes off. So just be true to yourself. Again, know your application. Because they can ask you any little tiny nitpicky thing on your application, and if you don't know it, it could come off a certain way. So you got to make sure that you study your application because ENT does late interviews. So we submit your application is due in September, and then we actually don't start interviewing until earliest comes in November, but majority of them are in December and January. So that's a lot of time to start forgetting a lot of the stuff on your application. So make sure that you read through your application. Make sure you're prepared too, because programs want to know, why did you pick us? Why are you here? Why are you interested in this? And if you just say, oh, I'm interested because I'm trying to get a job, it might not go as well, even though they do understand that, but show some interest, because I applied to some programs that, I've never been to a certain state or a certain area. And, I was trying to get a job, but you need to make sure that you read through it and say, well, this program actually does have a really great thing for this, or a really great thing for that. Or, I see someone here did some research in this and I'm really interested in that. So making sure that you, one, know yourself and know your program that you're interviewing at as well.
Like they know why you're there, but you can't be like, you know why I'm here.
I need a job. And I'm glad that you said that, Connor, about how you start getting offers in late November, December, January, because you do submit your application in September, and so you might see people who get offers earlier, like family medicine, internal medicine, and start freaking out, like, why the heck am I not getting called? I'm doomed. I'm screwed. Maybe I should dual apply. When it could just be like, this is the cycle, and you'll get like 10, 15, 20 offers in like November, December. So just be patient and don't be weird on the interview trip. Like, literally, don't be weird. I have stories. Like, I met one guy during the interview who said, I like to breed birds and kill them for fun.
Jesus.
He said it during the interview to the PD.
There's people out there that do that. Just don't tell programs that.
Yeah, don't tell them.
Keep that
They
in
don't need
your
to
back
know
pocket.
You don't need to know that.
Well, ENT, we're pretty normal and nice, though. I don't know if we're weird people, Connor.
The thing about being weird is that you don't know you're the weird one.
Maybe
You know?
it's me, and that's why I didn't meet any of them.
It was funny because I was actually talking to April about this because, when I was applying, some of the people in my program, some of my mentors said, oh, don't worry, you seem normal, so don't worry, you're going to meet a lot of weird people on the trail. And when I got to the trail, I didn't really meet too many weird people. So I really started thinking, am I the weird one? But I mean, in otolaryngology, I can only just reiterate what April said. There's a lot of really, really cool people that you meet on the trail. A lot of these people are going to be lifelong friends. There's some people that only met at 1 or 2 interviews and we still text. And, match day, we're very interested to see where we're going because these are going to be your future colleagues. So be nice to each other on the interview trail because these people are going to remember that. And you never know if this person's going to be the chairman to a program that you're trying to apply to. Because there's some people that you meet on the trail and you don't forget some of the stuff that they do. And again, medicine, especially otolaryngology, is a really, really small field. We accept around 300 and I think, 310?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, people each year. So, I mean, it's a very, very small field. So people will remember and they'll remember for a lifetime. So just be nice to everyone that you meet because you guys are all there. You're going to be colleagues. Just be respectful.
Connor, just speaking with you for a couple minutes now, I can tell you unequivocally you're not weird.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Your internet's weird, but you're not weird.
Yeah, I don't know what's up with my internet.
No shade.
That Michigan internet.
And especially, you said only 310 are accepted a year, and that's just generally, not even like the melanated.
Right.
So keep that in mind. Like, you will be remembered. So always leave a good impression. So next question comes from the chat. Someone wanted to know, were you always ENT? I know, Connor, you said initially you were thinking about pediatric surgery, but this person wanted to know, was there at any other point in time when you were debating between different surgical specialties?
I didn't really debate between other surgical specialties. I rotated on ortho and didn't really, it was pretty obvious to me that wasn't really for me. But I did, I really liked internal medicine a lot. I liked kind of using my brain and thinking, which is why I think I recognized that I wanted to do surgery, but I also still wanted to kind of have that clinical aspect, which is why ENT seemed really attractive to me. And again, I think one of the reasons I liked medicine was because the people I worked with were just really nice and really awesome. And so for me, it's just, that environment is really important, which is another reason why ENT made a lot of sense for me. But I wasn't really choosing between a lot of other surgical specialties. Maybe Connor can speak to that some.
Yeah, I mean, the only surgical specialty I thought into was gen surg to pediatric surgery. I do have a lot of friends that really dove into a lot of the different surgical specialties and subspecialties and things like that. Again, I was interested in doing a lot of OR and working with my hands, but also having a lot of medicine. So that really narrowed it down to otolaryngology, ophthalmology, OBGYN, and urology. And I knew urology was not for me, OBGYN was not for me, and ophthalmology creeps me out. So it really just landed me down to otolaryngology. But I mean, that being said, it's, these programs, they know that you're going to try to pick the best fit for you. So I guarantee there's a lot of people, and I know people that figured out third year that they're interested in ENT, and that's the end of third year, and they were interested in orthopedic surgery, and then they did their first away and it just wasn't for them, or they did urology or whatever it was. And programs know that. So that's why when you're interviewing, one of the first questions that everyone says is, who are you and why did you pick this specialty, right? And if you can just be honest and say, I was actually interested in pediatrics and pediatric surgery. And then, once I finally got my feet wet with otolaryngology, I just realized the breadth of this care or, whatever it might be. And just be honest with your explanation, because people get that and they'll be able to look at your application, because I promise you, you're going to put everything about yourself from undergrad up until, that point in time on that application. So they can see that journey with you and they can be like, you're saying that you were ENT, from day one, but then what were you doing, first year, so, be honest and just say, I found this late, but I know this is for me.
Right. Some folks, with ortho, they say they probably couldn't crack it. For urology, they probably couldn't go with the flow. So,
I'm just. Nelson, can you leave?
I got some more if you want.
Okay, let's go.
No, I'm on the spot now. Next question.
Okay. No shade to ophthalmology, but eyes freak me out too. I couldn't. No disrespect. So another question that I have is that might make you think a little bit is, what is one highlight from medical school that you can remember besides match? Because there's nothing like matching, but what's like one high that you remember throughout this whole journey? I know that's
feeling compelled. Go for it.
Honestly, I think that one of my favorite parts about medical school was how each year got better. I think once you really dive into it, the first year you're really excited and you start off, and then you realize that, why am I learning the Krebs cycle? And then second year you start to realize that people have these inborn errors of metabolism and stuff. And then third year you start to see it. So every year it gets better. I think that one of the biggest highs for me was probably on my away rotations, where you just realize that you kind of study and you work hard for these 3 years, and now you're there, and this point is now where you can start working with patients, kind of doing what you want. It's kind of the culmination of everything, and everything that you really learn is important. I remember on one of my aways, I had dove into something first year, and it was something in biochemistry, and I didn't think it was going to be important, and then I ended up getting asked this question. I didn't get it right, but I mean, it was great, great to know that those questions come up when you're a fourth year student, and no one judges you for getting stuff like that wrong. But it's really cool to see that everything from the start of medical school up until you finish, and even when you're practicing as a resident or as an attending, it's all important for some way, because you're treating patients. And I think that once you really dive in and you start really working with patients, and one of the catalysts to patient care, I think that's a very, very humbling experience. And a lot of us can say that this is really why we wanted to become physicians in the first place, is to kind of work with people when they're at their most vulnerable. And I think that was a really big high, is, wow, we're really doing this.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that those moments when you start to kind of feel like a physician, you're like, wow, people look at me as like, as their physician, or I've had patients like, oh, do you have a business card so I can see you like in the clinic, like when I'm in the ED, and I'm like, no, like that's not really how it works. But like kind of recognizing that people see you in that role, and that those initial, like when that first happens, you're kind of like, wow, this is, I'm really going to be a physician, which is really awesome. And then I think also for me, like I formed some really great friendships in medical school, and those people that I've met that helped me get to where I'm at, and that I'll, continue to keep those friendships forever. Is something that I really value. And I don't think I made great friends in undergrad as well, but I think it's different in medical school because the grind that you go through together and kind of the struggles, you really connect with those individuals. So that's something that I was really happy about.
And sorry, Connor, going back to your previous point, some folks might, decide against opto because they can't see themselves doing it. And emergencies, too many alarm signals, too many warning bells against it.
Nelson's got them all.
That one dad that just wouldn't stop talking after taking a little bit too much of that Jesus juice.
Hey,
that's you.
I got the dad jokes all day. That's what I do.
I'm here for it.
Yes, April. Thank you.
In the future, if someone asks you for a business card, just say, I don't got a business card, but I do have Venmo and and Zelle.
Venmo, Cash App.
Zelle,
all of it. Zelle.
I got them all.
I was so thrown off by that. I was like, a business card?
Yeah.
You want to see the clinic?
Yeah. You got to get your headshot. I mean, your headshot, but you got to get it on a card.
Thank you, girl.
And hand it to them and be like, you can come see me in clinic, but you can also pay me now. Thank you.
Right.
So, another question, do you have any advice for people that are like going through the trenches right now, like deep in medical school, feeling really like dejected, any words of encouragement or advice for them?
I remember on my first sub-I was feeling like just really overwhelmed, like I was working really hard, but it wasn't really going noticed. And I reached out to one of my mentors who kind of told me, like, keep working hard. Don't think that what you're doing isn't going noticed or is going unnoticed. And because I think it's hard when you're just like, you come in every day early, you're working really hard, you're doing everything you can, and you just feel like no one is recognizing that, or you're just kind of being average, or you just don't really know where you stand. I think the uncertainty of that was really getting to me. And then I got that advice and I was like, like trying to still stay motivated. And like the next week, my chief resident came up to me and was like, April, we really see that you're working hard. Like, don't think that, she just validated all the things that I was having doubts with. And so I think if you're feeling like that, recognize that people really do, notice when you come in early. They notice when you're working hard. And they also notice when you're just being like a nice, helpful person on the team and to your other resident or other medical students. So that would probably be the advice I would give, and advice I got that I found to be really helpful.
Yeah, and hang in there. We've all been through it. Everyone trips and falls and things like that. Just keep pushing through, but don't suffer alone. You have a lot of people that are here for you. I know everyone in this chat, do we post our emails or phone numbers or anything like that for anyone?
Not phone numbers.
Not phone numbers, all right. Or emails or something. But I mean,
someone actually requested your Instagram, but that's
Okay.
But I mean, we are here for each other, and I think that, one, speaking to the Black community, but also just anyone in general that's in the medicine, we're all colleagues, and we've all been there, whether it's the first year struggling or it's a fourth year. We've all been through that, and don't sit down and think that you're alone in this, and that no one else has felt like the way that you're probably feeling right now, because someone has, and reach out for help. Talk to a mentor. And this is why mentorship is key too. I went to a mentor and said, I'm not doing super great right now. I was like, all right, let's sit down, let's grab some coffee, and then right after that, you're feeling great again. Just finding ways to kind of recharge yourself, but just know that everyone sits down and they doubt what they can do. And they sit there and be like, they had this bad test, or, something didn't go the right way and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But don't let that bog you down.
Great advice.
Mm-hmm.
Totally unrelated point, but is this an ENT thing? Because both of y'all skin is glowing and I'm happy right now because y'all skin is glistening.
It's that post-match. That post-match.
It's like I got that intern, like
the intern post-match.
Come to us for all your future facial plastics needs.
Please.
Plug. We are reaching the end of this section. The next person is in the chat room right now in the brain room, but we want to thank you guys so much for hopping in, especially on short notice. You guys were amazing, dropped some absolute gems. And if you have anything to plug, if you want to give out your Instagram, comment, whatever. April, I think Connor froze. Oh man.
Did he froze again?
Yeah, if you guys want to plug anything, feel free, April, as well. If you're working on anything or announce, feel free. This is your platform.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you guys for inviting us both out. I know he just texted me saying give his out. I don't know if he means his Instagram or his email, but I can give both of those to y'all. Should I just chat that, like type it in the chat, or?
We can include it in the description. Okay. Actually, you can type it too if you'd like. Absolutely.
Okay. It's just easier to do that. But yeah, so Connor and I both just matched at I matched at Vanderbilt and Connor matched at Michigan. And so definitely reach out to either of us if you interview at those places and need any tips or, places to stay, anything like that. We're here for you. And particularly if you do any away rotations at those institutions, we got you all and we want to look out for you. So thanks again for having us. We'll drop our emails and our Instagram handles as well.
Hey, thank you, April. Appreciate you.
Yep, thank you.
They're being so gracious to give their information, so please don't abuse it or take advantage of it.
Yeah,
second that.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, we're back.
Bye.
Yeah. All right, dope. So let's see. Oh, Connor came back.
He's back.
Is he? I'm trying to find his email.
There he is.
Oof. This internet.
Hey.
Connor, can you drop your whatever information you were hoping to share with people tuned in?
Yeah. Do we say it or we type it in the chat?
In our chat.
I'll just copy and paste it onto the YouTube chat.
Perfect.
How many people are on the YouTube? How many viewers?
Right now, 22 people watching. I think it went up to like 25, 26.
Nice.
But a lot of people will just, because we post this afterwards, so what'll happen is they'll actually slide into our DM and then request your information that way too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right, cool. Thank you guys. Feel free to stay if you like. I'm gonna let in the neurosurgery future neurosurgeon Liz. But otherwise, thank you all so much. You can exit as you'd like.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks for having us.
No problem. All right, gonna let in Liz. Hello, hey Liz, how you doing? Hello?
Oh, we
Oh
can't
no,
hear, but
can you hear us? We can't hear you either.
I'm living for these glasses and lip combination.
Okay, I got you.
What's
Yes.
up? How you
No.
doing?
I'm good. How are y'all?
Good. Thanks for patiently waiting. We just got done with the previous group.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm living for this glasses and lip combination.
Thank you, girl. Trying to make the days as nice as I can.
What is that lip color?
I forgot it.
I might
It's
have to
ColourPop. It's ColourPop.
color. Okay, I might have to hit you up for that specific
I
color
know.
because it's a look.
Yeah, thank you all for joining. This is our last installment in the surgery quadruple header, I guess. For everyone tuning in now, I'm Nelson. One of the co-hosts of the Black Kids White Coats YouTube channel. With me is Adama, the fellow co-host, and we have Liz, an incoming neurosurgery resident. That deserves a round of applause. That's amazing. And she's going to SUNY Buffalo, SUNY Buffalo. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Sweet. So, yeah, do you want to introduce you real quick and hand it off to Adama? She'll kind of be taking the reins as well on
Okay.
this one.
So nice to meet you, Liz. Thank you so much for giving us a piece of your Tuesday afternoon. Do you mind telling us about your journey into medical school?
Okay. Yeah, so pretty broad. But I probably knew I wanted to be a doctor since I was little. My whole life has kind of been working towards medical school. Yeah.
Be as broad or as narrow as you like. You just, you know.
Too broad?
Okay.
Feel free
Okay.
to tell everything.
I'll shorten it. I'll make it like really specific. Okay. How'd you know you wanted to do neurosurgery?
Okay. I probably figured out early on as well, maybe around like early college, that neurosurgery was what I wanted to do because I knew I wanted to operate. I was always drawn towards surgical specialties because to me, that was a chance to be able to physically fix problems with people in addition to using medicine and diagnosing. And then with neurosurgery, I think I always loved neuroanatomy, neuroscience, the brain, the spine. So I married those two, and that's kind of how I got at neurosurgery.
And then as someone, because in my institution we had no like zilch, no one had any exposure to neurosurgery except I think one lecture post match in fourth year, which is obviously useless. So for someone who may not have early exposure or know for sure, do you have any advice for them in medical school to kind of get their feet wet and build connections?
Yeah, for sure. So my experiences in neurosurgery, we had one lecture first year by a neurosurgeon, and I honestly just emailed him and was like, hey, I'm interested in neurosurgery. Can we meet? Can we talk? You know, is there any opportunities you have? And he let me shadow him in a surgery, which was one of the common procedures. Surgery I loved, it was an ACDF in the neck. And so firstly, I would just say reaching out to people never hurts. People can say no and shut you down, but people are also very open. Like I honestly was shocked at how receptive he was in letting me be in his OR and teaching me while I was there. Also, reaching out to your residents, if you have a neurosurgery department at your school, reaching out to your residents. And I would probably recommend the chief resident, or if you have close ties to another resident, just because the chief kind of understands the workings more of the program, what neurosurgery is, and they can connect you with the right person to help you out. And then as far as timing, so I knew early on, so obviously I kind of started to get my feet wet first year, but really I think third year is a great time to also get exposure because you start to be more clinical, you understand more about medicine, and you kind of understand how to be in the hospital more. When I was a first year in the OR, I was clumsy, I was scared to touch anything, I didn't know what I was doing, but you kind of learn through your clerkships how to better be a med student and how to be useful. So I think third year is a great time reaching out we had the opportunity to rotate through neurosurgery as one of our cores through surgery. So also asking your, surgery coordinator when you get to that point, or a little bit ahead in advance, if you ask your friends who the coordinator is, if that's an opportunity and option for you.
And then how important is research if one wants to apply into neurosurgery?
I would say you want some research. The more research, the better. And then also the closer to neurosurgery that it is. I probably had less research on the spectrum of research and applicants for neurosurgery. And it wasn't all directly neurosurgery related, but I definitely would say you want to have a project or two that you're working on, even if they're long term. Again, you want to try to publish. Case reports are sort of low-hanging fruit in the world of research. So trying to get in on one of those. But yeah, I would definitely say you want something in that application so that you can talk, because in interviews as well, they like to ask you about that. So you want to have something to talk about.
And then how important are aways?
Very muy importante, I would say. And aways are important for two reasons. One, I didn't know where I wanted to practice. So if you do know where you want to be, doing an away there is a great way to like put your foot in the door and be well known at that program and have a higher chance of matching. And then secondly, every other place you interview kind of judges you based on your letters of recommendation that you would get from aways, because especially I imagine they're gonna be a lot more important as step one is changing and becoming pass fail, and that's not really gonna become a major factor in whether you get an interview or not. But it's a chance for people to see how good of an impression you can make and how hard you work in a new setting and how you adapt and interact with people, which is something that they actually really care a lot about.
And then may I ask if you're comfortable sharing as far as the interview trail goes, how many did you apply to? And then, or how many interviews did you go on?
Yeah, so I applied to everywhere because I was like, it was really hard for me to gauge my own competitiveness because I knew I didn't have a lot of research, and that was something that I deemed as very important. My step score was good, but I was like, I just wasn't sure, so I applied everywhere. In hindsight, I didn't need to apply to like University of Puerto Rico. I don't speak Spanish that well, but I just
in the moment you're like, no, I gotta apply everywhere.
Yeah, because I just was like, I knew I wanted to do neurosurgery, and I was very open to go anywhere to be able to achieve that goal. So I applied everywhere. I got 13 interviews, but went on 12 in the cycle.
They have a program at University of Puerto Rico?
They do, my friend. They have programs they have 114. That's the total number of programs they have for neurosurgery in US.
Did you go?
That's little compared to. Do you know how many spots there are by any chance?
There are, I want to say
2 average program.
I think there's 230 total. Each program ranges, about half of them are one applicant, and then the other half are 2 to 4. But only a handful do like 4.
Wow.
Wow. Wow. So compared to ENT, which you just had, that was like what, 310?
Mm-hmm.
They were both very competitive. Amazing. So
Yeah.
we do have a question, just kind of more specific to your own trajectory. What kind of area in neurosurgery do you want to pursue?
Another
If you
one
know.
ask questions on the trail. I am very interested in vascular neurosurgery. I think that's a very intricate and awesome area of neurosurgery. The procedures are very delicate and minimally invasive is kind of where the world is moving towards. And there's a lot of that in vascular. So that's one area, but I'm honestly very open and very unsure as well. I've probably bounced around every specialty because I enjoy them all so much.
Well, I
Awesome.
know, just in case, I know a vascular neurosurgeon. She's melanated, she's nice,
Okay.
smart,
There you go.
smart. So if you would like me to link you up with her,
I would. I
Just
would.
send her this link.
everything. She's everything, and she's woke. Obviously,
Okay.
she's brown, but I mean, like, she's just up to date on pop culture. So I appreciate her
Yeah,
very much.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
We definitely put you in touch with her. And then, do you? So you said you yourself personally did a ways. How many did you do? And in hindsight, how many would you recommend for someone that's interested in, or not interested, like committed, wants to be a neurosurgeon?
Okay. I did 2. And in hindsight, I would have loved to do 3. It just physically wouldn't fit. But I think 3 is a really good number just because I had kind of a 50-50 with mine where I really, really liked one. And then I liked one, just not as much as the other one. So I think aways are a really great opportunity, one, to see what programs you really, really like, because it's hard to get all of that information on interview day. And then, like I said, you really can like solidify, like I matched at one of my ways. So you can definitely like raise your chances exponentially of matching by doing more ways. But I wouldn't recommend more than 3 because I know people who did 4 and they were just so tired by the end and it kind of becomes, miserable.
Mm-hmm. And then one of the questions from the chat, they want to know how long is the neurosurgery residency, and do you know what the lifestyle is like?
So residency is 7 years long. And lifestyle, it kind of varies a lot during the years. I know most places, intern year, second year is like die by fire year. Like everything gets very, very heavy. So first year, you're an intern, you're going through all these other rotations. But kind of second and third year, when you're really mainly on neurosurgery and you're still fairly new, those are longer and harder. And then you get more operative later in your years. So I don't know how much of the OR you see first year, but you definitely start to see it second year, and you get to operate more third year and onward. And then usually you have a research year built into the program, usually around 4 or 5. That research year can also be sort of an enfolded fellowship, even though the policies are changing a lot with that. What that is basically you can become certified in like vascular neurosurgery or pediatric neurosurgery within residency, so you don't have to go on to fellowship afterwards. But that's still kind of changing. And then you have your chief year, either 6 or 7 before you finish.
Oh, that's a journey.
Yeah. Yes.
What about life? Oh, go ahead, Adam.
Oh no, I was gonna say it's a journey, but the time will pass anyway. So if you're passionate about it, get it done.
Right. So what about afterwards, after residency lifestyle?
Yeah. So after, again, deciding on if you choose to do fellowship or not. So most fellowships are 1 year. Vascular tends to take about 2 years after residency. And fellowship life is very similar to resident life. So still pretty hardcore. But after that, I'm not 100% sure what life is like as an attending. I haven't really got a good understanding of what your hours, because they're long and hard in residency. They're long and hard in your post life. It's your post residency fellowship life, but I'm not 100% sure.
I mean, the neurosurgeon that I personally know, she works hard, but she still looks really good. So I'm like, can't be not like that. But like,
She's balanced.
Yeah, she's found the balance. So she's living her best life, and her wigs are laid to the gods.
Look, when I might, even with my little residency salary, you go up just a little bit from med school.
Enjoy yourself a little bit.
I tried to go up a little bit, and my first day of residency, my wig came off.
And look at us now laughing at it. So
sis, I'm not laughing at it.
Laughing with you.
I'm not laughing.
Yes.
Sis, I literally had on my wig that I was cute. Only Black person in the entire program, attendees included. And like we were all meeting, it was a meet and greet, and all of a sudden I felt breeze, and I was like,
that's not supposed to.
And then Beyonce, I called her Beyonce. Beyonce was on the ground. Nobody was letting me know nothing, and obviously they're looking at me, so you could just see my straight backs, and they were crusty. They weren't even like
Meek Mills.
Oh my God.
Real quick, so on the chat, so speaking of work-life balance, somebody was kind of asking about, of course, it's going to be tough, right? Do you have any kind of tips on how you'll handle it, or, like what's your mentality going into a tough residency?
So I think one of my goals is to be very efficient. You can live at work if you want to live at work. I definitely want to get my stuff done by a reasonable time to go home. I also just plan to not take work home. So like once I leave the hospital, we're kind of done with it if we can be, if time allows. And I don't know, I guess just trying to really enjoy every moment, just make the most of it. But yeah, again, very hard to tell in this time.
And then just a follow-up question to that, what challenges do you see yourself, I don't want to say having, but what challenges do you see yourself overcoming during this whole transition into residency?
Yeah, I think just really building the confidence of like, I'm a doctor, because not a med student anymore. You're going to be responsible for people. I think for me, sometimes it feels a little bit harder because I'm a little bit younger, and then sometimes people can tell that. So just really feeling confident and feeling like I deserve to be here is one of the biggest challenges I see for myself, probably.
Yeah, and a tip, because I get that, because Black doesn't crack, obviously. So sometimes patients can ask you how old you are, which is kind of an inappropriate question, I feel like, in some regards. So if they ever say like, wow, you look really young, I always say, well, then that must mean I'm really smart. So you should trust me to take care of it. And I said that. I'm like, so yes, I'm young. It means I must be really smart. And then they chuckle and they're like, yeah, you're right.
Keep moving.
It's sassy, but patients, you, as being someone that appears younger or is younger, you definitely have to set the dynamics and the relationship that you have as like, I am your provider and you are my patient, and you have to respect that relationship.
Speak on me.
But can you speak on maybe some challenges you had during medical school, or one challenge that you overcame? The first one that may come to mind.
I think one was really being able to assimilate into the neurosurgery group. So like I got my feet wet early on, but then that specific doctor left. So then we were left with, the rest of the faculty and the residents. And you have to kind of show a lot of push in order to really get help and advice and be seen. So I think that was really hard for a while, because I just felt like they didn't care. Like I was like, oh, I want to do neurosurgery, and you're just kind of floating around and nothing ever happened. So And like really to overcome that, I kept showing up and I kept showing my interest and I kept showing that I want to be here. And by the end, like the dynamics changed. I mean, I guess for them, it's like students come and go all the time. So they don't necessarily want to get invested too early with people who are just gonna leave and they're busy. So that's probably the first one that comes to mind for me.
And then do you have any advice for someone that's going through the trenches right now and kind of, you know how they say the light at the end of the tunnel, they don't see any light?
Yeah, I mean, I think neurosurgery is one of those fields, and probably any residency field, but it's one where it's really hard or really easy to tell yourself that you're not good enough or that you can't make it just because it's competitive. There's not a lot of spots for research. You're constantly comparing yourself to everybody. But no, I think if you really go in it 100% and make ties and networking is crazy huge in neurosurgery land. Everybody knows each other.
Yep.
Then you can overcome sort of not being as equipped in other areas. If you feel like your research is low, you really can, there's a lot of room to make up for things, especially with the ways, and again, making connections and showing people how intelligent and how hardworking and how quickly you can adapt to the environment. So just always staying positive. Pray if you're about that life. I pray every single day. I prayed all through med school, all through interviews, everything. Yeah, kind of very general advice. I'm not too sure of anything.
No, that's good.
Oh, that's great.
So I will say something that you said earlier really like made me go, yes, girl. I think you're one of the first, if not the only person, but I think one of the first, definitely for sure, that said, you know what? You were confident and you were like, my step score was good. And I'm like, yes. You gas yourself up. Your step score was
For
good.
sure.
And so what resources, and I know it varies from person to person, but what resources did you find were the most helpful for your step one success? And I hope you don't say sketchy, but if you do, I respect it. But yeah.
For sure. But yeah, might as well get out the way. Sketchy
Yep.
micro. Sketchy micro is very good for your microbiome. Also, I went through every Q bank that there was to study questions. So I went through RX, Kaplan, and UWorld, and then I went through UWorld Miss, and then doing the NB&E questions that are online. So that was really the main way I prepared for one. I also watched Boards and Beyond to strengthen weak areas or weak subjects, or just something I wanted to refresh myself on. Those are the main, and first aid, of course. That's about it for step one.
Liz, I was rooting for you until you said
sketchy is the truth.
It is. Facts.
They know. People know.
Talking about the Triton with the 3 horns.
Yep, you remember it too. And you remembered it.
You remember what was Corona? Because Corona was only like 3 seconds long.
It was the key.
Corona was a little spiral thingy.
Castle.
Yeah.
You remember it. You hate to admit it, but you remember.
You remember visual.
I don't remember anything. And
hey, scientifically proven. That stuff works.
As you can see, she matched into neurosurgery, so it might be all right or whatever.
Yeah. Liz, are you thinking, I don't know if you thought this far, but are you thinking academic or private practice or mix or what?
I'm almost 99% sure I want to go into academics, just because I think I find research very interesting and taking it a lot more in residency. And I also really value the training process and being able to train others. I love to teach others. Anybody who's ever like worked with me, MS3s and lower, I would always I love those opportunities just to teach people. So I'm almost 100% academic medicine.
Awesome.
Man, I'm like, please stay in academia. We could benefit from some melanin magic, some Black girl magic.
Oh, definitely.
Okay, and so what was your highlight of this whole, I know this is very broad, but what is one highlight you can think of throughout this medical school journey, excluding match? Because match will always be.
Of course.
Yeah.
I think, wait, do interviews count in that?
Interviews count.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. I think my highlight was really my chances getting to like be in neurosurgery in med school, because it's kind of a unique place to be where you don't necessarily have responsibility and you have so much freedom that you can really go and see what you want to see. And also just because on a lot of my rotations, I was, or when I was at home, especially for my neurosurgery clerkship, I got to almost fully do a craniotomy and like tumor resection on a patient. And I love that for many reasons. One, it just shows how much my residents trusted me, how much trust I got from the people in my own program, that they also trusted me not to completely ruin this person's life. And just
You're out for a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. My internet at home is a mess. But yeah, it was just, it was a moment where I felt like I really could do this for the rest of my life and people would trust me to do this for the rest of my life. So that was one of my highlights.
Real quick, can you explain to everyone watching? Definitely not me, because of course I know what this is, but yeah, what a craniotomy is. And tumor resection.
Okay, yeah.
How crazy it is that you got to do this.
It was wild. So basically what a craniotomy is you make an incision, you remove the scalp, the skin, the muscle underneath, and you basically want to make an opening in the skull, and you can either do a burr hole, which is just you drill a hole, or you can remove a little bone flap. So you can make a circular piece, take off the bone, and then we just, the tumor was very superficial, so we didn't have to go diving anywhere. We
no big deal.
used some forceps and took a little bit of tumor. And then if you take a bone flap, use screws to screw them back on, or plates and screws, and then you'll just close up the skin on top. Yeah.
And the person walks away afterwards and they're cool.
He's fine, yeah.
Done, Nelson.
That is amazing.
It's just like taking out a lipoma. It's like the same thing.
I mean, yeah, just brain surgery, that's all.
But yeah, it was very exciting.
That's amazing.
Do you have any advice for people who their suturing is not the best, things that you found that helped your surgical like suturing skills?
I would say practice makes perfect. I was suturing like cardboard together. I would just like,
oh wow.
I would you can buy suture kits online. I would just always have like an extra like needle driver and some stitches, and I would literally like stitch fruit, stitch bananas together, stitch oranges together. So it's really practice makes perfect with those. And you can just, like I said, you can find some, if you can find a needle driver and you can find some suture, then some suture with needles and like monochrome or something, you can essentially stitch up anything that you have lying around at home, and it will save a lot of money.
Definitely don't suture up people.
No people. No people. Fruits, bears. Okay.
Grapes.
I mean,
right.
Low key though, your friend might have a really like a cut to suture or to damage. You know,
no anesthetics, no lidocaine, just straight.
A little superficial lidocaine.
No.
You got to preface it first. Give them a preface like, yo, well, you know, I'm a doctor now. I didn't graduate, but yada yada yada.
I bet her surgical skills are A1. She could do it. She could do it.
Free.
No, and I mean, I'd also say, I don't know if this is kind of an around the world thing, but my school would have like a suture lab that you could go to. So you could have high quality things to suture together and someone to actually teach you. And then also if you're on surgical rotations, getting in the OR as much as possible because people will give you opportunities. Obviously, if you learn how to tie, you have to learn how to tie first before you even get to pass suture. So,
Oh no.
just being
Audio went down just like 2 seconds when after you moved it, after you said learn how to tie.
Oh yeah, learn how to tie and then be in the OR as much as possible because you just get more opportunities to practice on. Because suturing people is also very different from suturing, you know, like a banana or something. So just making sure you're always around so that you can get opportunity.
Awesome. Yep. Thank you so much for that. I think we're rolling up on time now. Thank you so much for all the gems you've dropped. You are absolutely amazing. Congrats on neurosurgery.
Congrats.
Yeah, represent. Go kill it. Be safe out there. And yeah, again, thank you. If you have anything you want to publicize, any, you know, social media, any events, whatever, feel free. There's your platform. If not, no worries.
Cool. I mean, not any particular, but y'all can feel free to like share my email. I'm always happy to email people and answer questions, even beyond.
Sure.
And
Sure
then,
thing.
like we said previously, she's being really gracious in giving out her information. If you could please not take advantage of it, we would really appreciate it.
Yeah, be respectful.
And
All right.
we'll be in contact because I need to give you the contact of the vascular neurosurgeon that I know, and you need to give me that lip color. So touch.
I got you.
All right. Awesome. Thanks again, Liz. And thank you everybody for tuning in. It's been a marathon session, but I think it was a great and very informative several hours here. But yeah, thank you again, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Like, comment, subscribe, share. Tell your friends, tell your kids, tell your wife, tell everybody.
Tell your side.
Yeah. All right. Peace out. Again, thank you guys. Have a good one.
Thank you.